Do 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 do. Yeah, break it down. What? Yeah, yeah. Do 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 do. What? We did it. We're here. We're streaming. The world is a beautiful place, filled with beautiful people doing beautiful stuff. And you're one of them. Did you know that? You're one of them? I hope you know. Oh man. I just like didn't sleep last night. Just straightforwardly. I feel like my brain sometimes is just like, just stay up. Just stay up, bro. Like you can do it. Just stay up. Just be awake. Keep researching, keep doing stuff, keep fiddling, keep fussing, like keep doing all that kind of stuff. Don't go to sleep. What do you need to sleep for? Sleep. You'll get enough sleep when you're dead, right? And now here I am, sleepy little bunny, being like, "Hey guys, how are you? Today we're gonna talk about Canada." And that's basically all I did today. Deal with the fact that I didn't sleep. That's it. Not too much in terms of like news, frankly, across the board. Like no big articles, I should say. Got a couple of things to share. I mean, as you can see by my opening picture here, the unvaccinated truck drivers blocking the Trans Canada. It's just really. I think it's kind of odd. Like I understand why they're doing it. I understand why they feel the need to do it, right? I'm not genuinely that interested in demonizing them. I think there are a lot of people on the left who are looking at these truckers because they're connected to vax movements and all of this. And I mean, for goodness sakes, I've got an article here that does exactly the thing that I'm talking about, which is really demonize these guys, really treat them like it's a fascist movement. It's it's a connection to fascism. Did I close it? Oh yeah, here you go. From Northern Currents, right? Widely condemned Truckers for Freedom rally features Trudeau figure in a noose. And of course, all the like COVID-19 vaccine not safe, like there is an anti-vax aspect to this for sure. They're meeting with Maxime Bernier, all of this, but like, it's just a touch odd, I have to say. Like what these guys are really fighting for is that they want to get back to Denny's. And I'm not saying that as a way to discount them or as to dismiss them or anything, but just to set the stakes of what it is they're going out onto the streets and shutting down the Trans Canada, which who's been saying we should be doing stuff like this, right? Hey, hi, hello, right? And it's just like odd that it's being done because people are like, I'm sick and tired of sitting at home. Like, I want to go to Denny's, right? Like, every so often I want to go to a concert or a basketball game or something, right? Like, I want to go out and live life and all of that. And it's like, yeah, I understand all that. Like, that's fine and all, but the reality is like it's about going back to Denny's, right? Your daily Timmy's run and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I think it's so odd is because like don't you feel like there's serious things going on in the society, like things that are grander or more important or more pressing than like our desire to go back to Denny's, you know? That like, hey, there are homeless people, right? Have you noticed that? Hey, there's 60% of the society is saying it's struggling to feed itself. Hey, did you notice that poverty is going up? Did you notice that? Oh, hey, did you notice? Perhaps you might have noticed that home prices are going out of control, right? Like maybe you've noticed that, and like, I just feel like what's going to happen with these truckers, like this energy that's coming out that's saying like, you know, Trudeau's a traitor and we need to put a noose around him and all this kind of stuff, which I mean, I'm like not opposed to that imagery. I have to be straight. Like I'm not opposed. I don't look at that imagery and go like, oh, like I'm like, yeah, like, you know, Justin Trudeau is probably one of the worst prime ministers we have ever had. Like, the guy just takes cue cards and reads them. Like, he doesn't really have he's not really a leader, I think. By the way, Mock, how you doing, bud? Canada, Louisiana, California, Florida. I don't understand the comment, bud, but I'm happy you're here. Thanks, bud. And so, like, I understand the energy, and I understand the anxiety and the angst of it all. Like, you know, Trudeau, right? Like, the thing here, right? Like, but, like, and, like, here's a group of companies, right? So, Raymar Concrete Forming, right? Aurora Seeds. So, like, small companies, frankly. And so you've got a GoFundMe page that's raising, like, $3 million, right? In order to get back to Denny's. Like, really. And, like, you can blow up the, like, you know, the far right connections and all this kind of stuff, but, like, I think the thing that's just blowing me away with this conversation is, like, these guys really do want to just get back to normal. Like, that's their whole shtick. Like, they want to just get back to normal. And there's just no kind of realization or no kind of internal sense or sense that, like, normal was a disaster for most of us, right? And it's continuing to be a disaster. That if they were to open up, like, all of the places, which incidentally, like, Doug Ford himself, Ford says he can't see mass mandates lifting anytime soon, right? Like the restrictions, I mean, this is only for mask mandates, but, like, the restrictions that exist are going, like, they'll be eased slowly for sure. And there will be a moment where we will be rid of them. But, like, it's not like capitalism's going to come roaring back, right? Like, it's not like capitalism is going to and I don't know how to convince these truckers of this, right? It's not like the labor market is suddenly, like, everybody's just going to get really high-paying jobs and suddenly wages will go up and suddenly prices will go down and inflation will be cured and all of this kind of stuff. Like, I genuinely don't know what these guys are expecting, you know? And, like, the idea... Yeah, time to surround the halls of power. But this is kind of the thing that, like, we've got a group of people who are incentivized to do this kind of stuff. Like, these guys are blockading the Trans-Canada Highway with trucks. Good to see you, Alex. Good to see you, Rusty. But they're doing it for, like, gotta get back to Denny's. I know I just keep saying it, but I'm just flabbergasted. Like, I'm really flabbergasted. Like, these guys are getting finances all together and getting all the money and getting everything all together, and there's just, like, no sense. If these guys got everything they wanted, right? If they got everything they wanted, it would still be an unmitigated disaster, right? That the capitalist death cult, the decline of capitalism, is written in the stars at this point, right? Rent and housing prices are going out of control. Wages are stagnated. Like, inflation is going out of control. Prices are going out of control. We're in endgame capitalism. And so if we just opening everything up is not going to solve that, right? It's not going to resolve any of those problems. And in fact, opening everything up is just going to create a group of people who are just going to tell us all, just get a job, right? That's what they're going to say. Like, these guys that are doing this right now, when things open up and we're all still homeless, we're all still in poverty, we're all still working 3 jobs, we're all still doing all of the normal stuff that we were doing before, right? These guys will just be like, well, what's your problem? Just get a better job, right? Like, that is going to be their response to us. And it's flabbergasting to watch, like, how much energy and how much money and how much they're collecting so that they can get to Denny's. Like, That's really what it is. They'll like step over the homeless person, right? Tell the student who's struggling to pay rent that they just need to get a better job while they're swimming in debt, and then walk inside of a Denny's, abuse the wait staff, right? Like we've been seeing all this whole fucking time, and get their like hungry man meal, and that'll be the win for these guys, right? And it's just like, where is the leftist movement that's actually getting into the streets and doing this sort of stuff? I shouldn't say that. Like, Extinction Rebellion still exists. Like, the climate change protests still exist. There's people still trying to figure this stuff out. It's just like, just the more I see it, the more I'm just like, this is what you're fighting for? Like, get back to Denny's? Hey Zed, how you doing, bud? I keep seeing black and yellow flags like the Austrian Empire flag at this truck convoy. Okay. Yeah, these people are prioritize the individual over the collective, think we should all live in the woods alone, and they call this freedom. Yeah, like, I mean, as long as you deny that there is a labor market that is owned by a billionaire class, right, then you can make whatever claim you like about the society, right? You can genuinely say that, like, get a job is a reasonable thing as long as you don't acknowledge that the labor market itself is dominated by a small handful of billionaires, like oligarchs, right? It's like saying to a feudal serf, just get a new lord. Oh, you don't like your lord? Just move and get a new lord, right? Like, it's the same kind of logic. And in the end, it's a form of gaslighting. Like, this is where I'm going with this get a job crowd. Like, I'm over trying to, like, tell these guys, because if you tell them, like, I have a job or I have two jobs, right, then they just move the goalposts, right? Then it's just, well, get a better job, right? Well, get an education, right? All of these sorts of things. And in the end, these are just forms of gaslighting. And that's how I'm going to be talking to these guys from now on. Like, if someone is going to have the audacity to attempt to gaslight me by saying just get a job or get a better job or any of these sorts of things, I'm just going to tell them to stop gaslighting me. Like, please stop gaslighting me. Like, please stop pretending like the system is actually working, right? Like, I understand that you've managed to subserviate and obey the system successfully, right? And good for you, but it's not working for the majority of us. And you're just gaslighting us. And that's really what it is. It's all the same kind of, like, oh, workers are just lazy, like all of these statements, right? It's just a form of gaslighting, and we have to confront it directly. Like, be done with getting into, like, that's how gaslighting works. Is that they make a statement that puts you on the defensive so that you defend against the point that they made, and you don't have to do that. Like, and nor should you, right? Because gaslighters, the way that you defeat a gaslighter is that you point out that they're gaslighting. And you just say to them, like, look, I understand that you feel the need to gaslight people because your position is indefensible, right? Like, the system is in decay, the system is collapsing. It's no different than telling someone who is drowning in a pool to just swim harder, right? Like, that's what these gaslighters are doing. And they're doing it because they don't view you as a person. They view you as a commodity. And they're not engaging in the conversation in order to try to solve a problem or fix something, right? They're engaging in the conversation to demoralize you and put you back in the place that they want you to be in, which is as a commodity. They don't want you to be a human. They don't want you to be a peer or an equal. They want you to be a commodity, right? And this is why they tell you, like, oh, you're just being lazy. Oh, just get a better job. Oh, you got that degree? Like, all of this gaslighting. And that's exactly what it is. And it should be confronted directly. Like, if you're telling people to get a better job or get a job, like, stop gaslighting me. Just stop gaslighting me. Stop ignoring the reality of the situation that you live in, right? Stop gaslighting people. Oh, it's the Libertarian Party colors, black and yellow. There you go. People should tell these truckers, if you don't like it here, why don't you move out of the country? Yeah, I mean, but that's modern conservatism, right? Like, and today's video was all about this. Like, I couldn't get this out of my head. I was talking about this yesterday, and I thought I'm gonna make a clip out of this because the reality is that, like, to be a conservative in a society that is in decay and that is collapsing so thoroughly and obviously is to fall into a form of psychopathy, right? You lose connection to reality if you are defending a system that is failing, right? Like, it's not much different than just telling the people on the Titanic, like, oh, just swim harder, or oh, the boat's not sinking, right? Yeah, Sigma grind set. Sigma grind set. You're not Sigma grinding hard enough. Grrr, right? Alpha male. All that kind of, like, really, really toxic shit. Yeah, we're literally trained by a school education to be workers, but the ultimate goal is to be an owner and hire wage slaves. Exactly, right? Like, and, like, this is the big fear that's happening amongst small business owners, right? They're worried that they're going to become workers again, and they know how the society treats workers. And it's the reason why this great resignation is ongoing, because people are sick of it. And it's not like people are feeling that they even have to get into community organizations or any of that kind of stuff. Like, people are literally and genuinely, like, the wage isn't paying the rent anymore. It, like, that's how this system stops functioning, right? That the wage that you're making from the capitalist class no longer pays the rent demanded by the capitalist class. And so what happens? Right? You can't pay rent, so you get evicted. You get thrown out. And so homelessness spikes. And where do you think the revolution is going to come from? Right? That the revolutionary force that is going to exist in this society is going to be done by capitalism, right? Capitalism creates its own revolutionaries because it's incapable of doing anything but, right? And because you're dealing with a group of people who have lost the ability to have empathy. Like, they don't have it. Like, this is the point that I really do think people need to get a hold of, right? That centrists and leftists and all of this, like, we've got to get a hold of it, right? It isn't that they are, like, making a conscious decision and choosing to do this kind of thing. It's that they have lost the ability to have empathy. It's simply not part of their ethos or in their consciousness, to the degree that if they wanted to elicit compassion and empathy, they couldn't. Like, that's where we're at with people who are defending this abhorrent, destructive, overtly, obviously chaotic, evil system that is actively destroying every nation it touches, as well as its own nation. It's actively pursuing that path. And the people who are defending it are doing so because the system is working for them, and they simply don't care if it's failing you. They simply don't care. And they don't have the ability to care, right? And so, like, we just have to stop talking to these people as if they're suddenly going to have a come to Jesus moment, or as if they're suddenly going to change their mind. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Like, it's time to just be upfront. Like, okay, so you don't think I'm a person, right? Like, you don't think I'm a person, you think I'm a commodity, right? That's why you gaslight me. Because you think that I should just bow my head, be obedient, and get to work like a good little slave, right? Like, because I'm not a person, I'm just a commodity. And like, I'm no longer interested in talking to these guys as if their mind can be changed. Like, they're abusers. Like, that's what gaslighting people is. It's an abusive system that they're doing. And I'll say it over and over again. If they want me to stop talking this way about them, then they need to stop acting exactly like this. It's very straightforward, right? Like, I'm super done with this idea that, like, can you believe the conservatives? And oh my god, the conservatives. And I'm like, yeah, like, I'm over it. Like, that's who they are. They're not going to change, right? They're not going to change. They're going to keep voting for a psychopathic system that's abandoning the majority, right? That's what they want. That's who they are. They don't have the capacity to have empathy or see the world in a different way. That's gone. Like, that's gone. And if they don't like that we talk about them this way accurately, right, then they can stop doing it. Very, very, very simple, right? Very just like they keep throwing simple slogans at us. Well, here's a simple slogan. Like, I think that they're psychopaths and we should ignore them for the most part. Like, and when you talk to them, like, you don't need to justify yourself to these people. Like, that's the whole shtick with the, like, get a job thing and, like, the whole like, get an education. Like, they're constantly trying to get you to justify yourself to them. But they're narcissistic psychopaths who don't have empathy. Like, their opinion no longer matters, right? The only reason they matter in the conversation at all is because they are your enemy. They are the people who you are having to stand against. And make it explicit. Like, make it well understood. Like, stop gaslighting me. Hey, Robin, how you doing? How you doing? Hope you got over your difficulties with your computers and all that. It's always sucky when nefarious forces get involved. To get a good paying wage slave job, you have to get a good internship. To get a good internship, you have to go to an Ivy League school. I mean, for God's sakes, internships themselves are fucking absurd, right? Like, and what's Rusty saying? My parents gave me the old, if you don't like the low-wage, dead-end private sector job, then get a different low-wage, dead-end private sector job. Exactly. The issue is low-wage, dead-end private sector jobs with no benefits, no sick days, no health insurance or advancement opportunities. Yeah, that's real private sector opportunity. Yeah. And they want all jobs to turn that way, right? Like, the reason why the cult is going after like nearly 60% of Ontario's long-term care homes are in outbreak, right? Like, the reason why the death cult makes public services worse, right, over time is because they want to privatize them, and they want to privatize everything and turn them into this. Like, the goal of the capitalist class is to reduce wages to zero. Like, and or at least make it so that the wage you're being paid is completely chewed away by inflation, but completely chewed away by rising rents, rising prices, all this kind of stuff. Because fundamentally, they don't want you to have anything. They don't want you to be able to get any leg on it. They want wages to be zero, and they want rent to be higher than zero. And it doesn't work, right? But you're talking about a group of people who aren't capable of empathy, compassion, or reason, or any of these things. Like, these people deny the existence of climate change, for God's sakes. Like, they're not going to acknowledge the incoherency of their own system, like, that they defend, right? They're just gonna gaslight you. They're just gonna say, oh, just get a better job, right? Did you hear Biden cuss out that Fox News reporter right before he said inflation is good? He's trying to increase it. On Reddit, they were all like, yes, king, with 3K upvote, psychos. Well, I mean, it was kind of a funny moment. Like, that's my perspective of it. Like, Biden was just, like, muttering to himself, just like, yeah, inflation's great. What an idiot. And I'm like, yeah, like, it is a stupid thing to say. Like, it's a dumb question. Like, it's a moronic question to ask, frankly. But, like, the whole political system in America is just nuts. Like, they're all fucking crazy. Like, every part of them, the right, the left, all of it. Like, there's nobody in the conversation who is like a normal, reasonable kind of a person, right? Like, it's so funny because, like, that's the reason why Bernie Sanders has sparked up into major popularity, because he stood up and said the most reasonable shit of life. Right? Like, the most reasonable shit of life. Like, everyone should have health care. Every other nation has health care. We should just do what every other nation is doing. Most popular fucking politician in America, right? Like that's how degraded the capitalist death cult has become. Things are resolved. Yeah, fantastic, Robin. I hope you haven't been supplanted. I hope there isn't like some like neo-Nazi group behind your name now. It would break my heart, Robin. It would break my heart if that were the case. I'm just messing with you, though. It's, and I worry that I'm talking this way about these conservatives and all of this, but like we've gotta be talking about these conservatives more honestly, and I don't know how to do that without talking about this. Here, what do we got? The Canadian. Oh, commie. You're searching up the Canadian commie? Is that what you're doing? That's nice. Nothing's gonna come up. The Canadian lad, the Canadian. Yeah. No, they're not spreading my shit around, dude. They're not gonna say like, you're not gonna be able to search me up. They're not gonna suggest the Canadian commie, right? Like, and also I'm not big enough for that. I would have been interested to see what came up after you hit enter. That would have been kind of interesting to see. But like, they're never gonna spread me around, dude. I could have 100 million followers, and you could type in the Canadian commie into Google, and it wouldn't do anything, right? They're never gonna do that. Like, the cult is not going to act fairly towards leftists, towards people who are actively calling. Yeah, it's just so blatant. Yeah, it's going to get more blatant. Is the thing. Like, I've been saying it over and over again. Like, we are going to experience a moment where the ruling class of this society, which is the oligarchs, right? It's not the politicians. You do come up if you search, though. Nice, that's nice. So if you actually type in the Canadian commie and hit enter, I do come up. So it's not so bad. And also, like, if I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, which it's always fun to do that. Like, how many people are actually searching me up in the first place, right? Because those searches aren't based on the content that exists. The searches are based on how many people are actually searching it, right? I only have 876 subscribers or something like that, right? Like, I'm not a big channel by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just kind of getting... The wheels are just grinding up. They're just good opportunity to say, please share me around. Please tell your friends I exist, right? I'd love to have more people in the chat. I'd love to have more people around. I'd love to spread this message, right? Spread the good news. Because 1,000 subscribers is the magic moment, right? That's the magic moment when, like, everything changes for this channel when we hit 1,000 subscribers. And, like, I feel like I've actually gotten the imposter syndrome and everything, and gotten that a little bit more under control. I'm feeling a little bit better about it. I'm glad that I'm talking about it. I'm glad that I'm not, like, keeping it bottled in and just dealing with, like, the anxiety and the fear and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm glad that I'm actually talking about it openly, because when I talk about it openly, I get feedback from people saying, like, yeah, I feel that way too about lots of things. And it's like, I've never had anything actually work in this capitalist system. Everything is always like, try to build something, and along comes the capitalist hammer and just like, oh, it's a market crash, right? Goodbye, right? Or just outright capitalist stealing from me. Like, almost every job I've ever worked outside of, like, corporate culture, like, I have been stolen from. Like, the capitalists just steal from you in various ways. And anytime I work for corporations, right, like, the drain is overt. Like, you are a commodity to them, and it's really, really obvious. Like, you work at Starbucks for, 2 weeks, and you will encounter this, there's this, what's the phrase that gets used that really just shows this, which is, when you're off the clock, you can act how you want, but when you're here, you do what you're told. That's a paraphrase. It's not exactly accurate, but, like, that's the attitude of the managerial class in the corporate society, which is, like, you're here, so you're getting paid a wage, so this is how you're going to act. And it goes beyond, like, traditional labor. Like, it goes beyond, like, I have seen people get coached, is what they call it, coaching, on things like, hey, your face looks mean. Like, straight up. Like, I've seen managers pull people aside and say, like, hey, like, when you're working, like, your face looks mean. And it's like, that's literally just what her face looks like. Like, she has what's called resting bitch face, right? And so there's and this has been all acknowledged by Starbucks, everything I'm about to say here, which is that they've acknowledged that the mental drain, the emotional drain of this kind of work, where you have to create a false image of yourself, right? That who you are is unacceptable to the public, right? So you have to create a false image of yourself. And you can see this when you go into places and people are talking to you like this. Hey, how you doing today? Oh, wow, I'm so glad to see you today, right? It's and it's obvious, like, and there are people who are better at it, like, who are a little bit more subtle, but it's the same concept. You are creating a false image of yourself, and the maintenance of that false image is exhausting. Jim Carrey said he believes that depression is when your subconscious self is no longer interested in maintaining the avatar, right? That the fake image that you create and present to the world is exhausting to your inner self and your subconscious. And so depression comes along and destroys the false image and basically just puts you in bed and is just like, here you go. Get that false image cannot be maintained any longer. And we've created a culture of false images, right? That if you're a retailer, right, you are a false image, and the consumer is also a false image, right? And the conversation that you're having with one another is fake, right? It's a consumerist conversation that is based almost exclusively on the idea that both you and the consumer are both commodities. And the reason why I was so successful as a retailer, and if I had to go back into retail, I know that I would be quite good. And any person I worked with who also was really good understood the realities of these dynamics, right? And instead of entering them by presenting a false image of themselves, right? They enter into them by saying, no, I am who I am, and I'm going to present myself that way. And sure, you need to clean up along, like, you can't be like, swearing and, doing shit or any of that kind of stuff. But like, presenting yourself in the most genuine way makes you the most successful, because that's exactly what the culture is missing. Which is why when people who seem genuine show up into the conversation, they're just like, the culture is just like, yes, yes, yes. Like someone like Jordan Peterson, right? Like, say what you like about Peterson, he appears genuine, right? And that by itself is what gets him absorbed into the culture. Because no one is genuine anymore. There's no such thing as, and this is why I think channels like this and YouTube and all of this are starting to pick up, and like TikTok and all this, because people are genuinely interested in genuine people. They don't want the presentation, right? They don't want the like, this just in today, here we are at the news, right? The coiffed hair, like the perfect makeup, the suit, all of that. Like all the pageantry, all the false presentation. The people are beginning to tire of it. And they're looking for people who are actually just a real person who is speaking their mind and talking about things in a real way. I'd say that's simple. First of all, good to see you, Kate. Good to see you so early in the chat. This is going to be a good one. I always enjoy it when you're here. I'd say that's simply human nature, politeness, etc. No one wants to be unliked. No, that's true, Kate. But there's the alternative side to it. Like, I have seen people be coached in exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, it goes beyond like just being nice and wanting to be liked and all of this. Like, There is, without a doubt, an expectation of a false pageantry and a falseness, right? And like when I was at Starbucks, for example, there was a period of time where like if you weren't talking like this, you were coached. People would come over to you and say, "Hey, why aren't you talking like this? This is the way you need to talk." And this is how I talk. "Hey, how you doing, bud? What do you need today? You need some coffee? Yeah, all right, bud. What size? Okay. Anything else for you? Great." And if you're talking like that, when everybody wants you to talk like this, "Hey, how you doing today? So good to see you today. How much flair are you wearing?" Right? You get coached. You get coached. And it's especially bad when you get a manager who's kind of power tripping on it. Right? Like, I can walk up to people and just tell them how to act and how to be. Right? I've definitely seen managers get into an abusive pattern. Like, for sure. And I've seen how it alienates good workers. Good workers. Yeah, because it's fake. Right, Kate? Like, I don't like people that talking to me like that. Yeah, because it's fake. It's not real. Right? It's an image. Right? And just be aware, that image is coached. Right? It's not coming from the person genuinely. It's not their natural affectation. It's not how they're being. They're being told to be that way. Right? And there's reinforcements in the system, right? So first of all, if you're a new worker into it and you're seeing everyone acting that way, well, you start to kind of act that way just to get into the normalization of it, or you want to fit in, right? And if you don't act that way, there's a person who will talk to you about it, right? And they do. Like, that's their role in their job, and they do it, right? And it's also that when their higher up comes in, like the district manager walks in and sees everybody talking like this, and "Hey, how you doing today? Oh my goodness, yeah, it's so great, ha ha ha," right? Then the district manager like literally checks the box on the list of things that they are checking in on. So it's like a reinforcing system. And of course there are people who are naturally extroverted, right? I'm not denying any of that. Like, I know people who work at Starbucks and are happy to do it, right? And it facilitates their kind of desire to reach out and connect and all that kind of stuff. But like, the system is reinforcing this kind of overwhelming falseness that can't be maintained through periods such as this, right? Like, and I see it when I go into like a coffee shop or something, on the rare occasion that I actually do. There's a falseness that has broken apart. And when I see the falseness, it's more obvious. So extroverts may be more content in seeking customer service jobs, but there are lots of other jobs available not representing the company to the people. I mean, I feel like that's kind of naive. Like, I'm an introvert, and I always take customer service jobs because those are the jobs that hire, and those are the jobs that are available, right? You can pretend like there are all these other jobs that are available, but like, there's a reason why there's homelessness. There's a reason why there's poverty, right? There's a reason these things exist. And you just take the job you can get, right? Because you got rent to pay. You got bills to pay. I had Rogers people at my doorstep doing promotion, and they hit me with the really over-the-top customer service-y tone. It's so unnatural and out of place. Yeah. Yeah. And they expect you to participate in it, right? That is the expectation, right? There's a script. You know it, right? When you go into a place, there's a script. And you know what the script is. And yeah, customer service hasn't been solved by AI yet, so it still pays something. Yeah. But, you know, if you work in customer service, you're going to get told get a real job, right? You're going to get told like, well, what, you want to be paid a living wage for just like showing people toys, like that kind of thing, even though the company is a multi-million-dollar company, even though the CEO is paid like $1 million. Like, it's you know, and it all flows into this concept of alienation, right? That capitalism alienates people from their own work. That people who find ways to be in customer service without getting into the falseness of it are still alienated from it because they face fairly major pushback from people higher up the chain. And corporate culture, it's especially corporate culture, right? Like corporate culture seeks to reinforce that. And you have a person whose job it is in order to be this way and to do this and to reinforce it. And if you're not stepping to, well, then there's another manager that does it. Like, there's like layers of checks. And they call it unskilled labor. Exactly. And they call it unskilled labor. It's discipline and it's gaslighting. Like, the idea is to demoralize you. The idea is to make it so that you can't feel like you can actually be even your own person. And sorters and parcel unions is always available. That's a cute comment, Kate. Like, it's just kind of cute, frankly. Like, good luck. Off you go, right? Like, there's a reason there's huge unemployment. There's a reason why there's homelessness. There's a reason why there's kind of stuff. Like, what you're doing, Kate, is a form of gaslighting. Like, you gotta know this. Like, it's just a way to deflect from the realities of what's going on in the society and say, like, just get a job. Like, that's essentially what you're saying here, right? Just get a different job, right? It's a form of gaslighting, right? You're just telling me to shut up about it. You're just telling me to not actually, or you can work your way to the top like my dad. He built a total business from the ground. Yeah, good for him, right? Like, good for him. I'm sure that he had the opportunity to be able to do that, right? But it's not the 1960s anymore. And like, we live in today, right? And exactly, damn boxes. Tons of homeless people have jobs as well, right? Like, and it's, you know, super good for your dad. Like, but this is what's going on with like, there is an inevitability, right? If 1,000 people try to start a small business, some of them will succeed inevitably, right? And of course, they're going to say, I succeeded because I'm the best, because that's a self-reinforcing idea, right? The meritocracy angle, which is very convenient. And most homelessness, unfortunately, is due to mental illness. Kate, come on, Kate. Like, no. Like, no. No, bro. Like, homelessness is caused by a variety of factors, and one of them is very simply people don't have money. And why don't people have money? Because the jobs aren't paying enough rent, or the jobs aren't paying enough to cover the rent. I think she meant a job is always available for her boyfriend, given that he is already in a union. Yeah, I mean, I believe we need more help and resources for the mentally ill. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, again, like, so you have an example in your own life where you have like a person who's mental illness and homeless. There are people in this chat who have experienced massive amounts of homelessness who don't have mental illnesses, right? That homelessness is a product of not having money. Like, that's what's going on. If you don't have any money, you become homeless. Like, and the rationale and the reason, I'm in Ohio. You can join UPS here with any felonies. That's where I met him. I mean, great. Like, again, Kate, like, that's great that you met the person who made it through, right? Like, if 1,000 people try to do something, some of them will achieve it. Like, and as long as you just ignore the reality of the people who are abandoned, right? Like, that's the central thesis of this channel, is to stand in solidarity with the people who the system abandons. And if all you do is pay attention exclusively to the people who manage to make it through, right? And then you can pretend as though the system is functioning, right? And then you can turn around and gaslight everybody about it. Like, That's what, like, I literally spent the first half hour of this chat talking about the thing that you're doing, right? Which is a form of gaslighting. You're just telling people to get better jobs. You're just telling people... I mean, I've been homeless for years, strung out on heroin and meth. So I don't understand what you're saying then. Like, you yourself have experienced homelessness. Like, you yourself have experienced drug use, right? And I don't understand why you're following this line. Like, we are dealing with a systemic failure. It's a systemic failure that cannot be solved by just telling people to buck up, by just telling people to get better jobs, by just telling people to get into, just get a better education, just do all these kinds of things, right? And it will not be solved that way because the system is hoarding all of the resources. The system is vacuuming all the resources into a pile and then creating barriers. And sure, will there be people who try something and it actually works? Yeah. Like, that is an inevitability, right? If 1,000 people try something, some of them will work. Most of them will not in this society. Like, we are talking about a society now where 60% of people are struggling to get food on their table. We're talking about a society now where housing prices have doubled in 5 years. We're talking about a society now where housing prices are so high that doctors, lawyers, and engineers can't afford homes in their cities that they were raised in, right? Like, you can't just focus on the people who succeeded, because success is an inevitability for some, right? Like, if your goal is to kill a duck, right? You take a duck shot, which is a scatter shot, and you shoot it, and it scatters, right? And some of the pellets are going to hit the duck, right? And if all you focus on and you treat these pellets that hit this duck as if they're heroes, and that's the solution, and then all of the pellets that didn't hit the duck, you say, oh well, you guys should have been more accurate, right? Like, you should have been there, and you backseat them, right? Well, it sidesteps the entire point that the system is structured so that the majority will miss the duck, but it's inevitable that some will hit. Like, the inevitability of certain people's success is exactly equal to the inevitability of some people's failure. And it isn't that those people who fail are worse people. It's simply the structure of the system, that we live with such limited resources. We live on such small amounts of small, like, tiny thresholds. Like, and it's worse in the United States, right? Like, the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage in the United States is $7.25, and it has been that way for 30, 40 years in many places, right? You can't stabilize your society this way, right? You cannot stabilize your society this way. That that there comes a point where the wages no longer pay the rents. It's just that simple. The wages no longer pay the rents. And if all we do is focus on the tiny, vanishingly small group of people who manage to actually become the small business owners, who manage to actually take that step over where they themselves are joining in the capitalist enterprise of exploitation, then we're never going to pay any attention whatsoever to the larger majority that is being abandoned. Like, it's frustrating. Like, I feel like there's a reefer madness aspect to all of this. That, like, We lived in a society that banned marijuana use while simultaneously smoking tobacco. And I feel like when it comes to issues like communism, when it comes to issues like the abandonment of the proletariat, the abandonment of the workforce, we're still existing in this really, really deeply entrenched reefer madness. Like, literally just like you say, hey, do you want to smoke some marijuana? And people go, oh, that's the devil's weed. I'm going to report you to the cops. Like, heightened hysteria about something that is no different than something you can buy in a store. Like, you can buy smokes all day. You want nicotine? You want tobacco? Right? Every single corner store sells them. They're easy to get. You can walk in and request them and they give them to you. Right? They come in little packages, neatly rolled, right? No, but it isn't a huge thing in 2022 because we've gotten through it, right? We figured it out as a people. We were just like, wait a minute, weed is not a thing, right? But as an analogy, we are still at that level and we are still in this place when it comes to talking about the labor market, when it comes to talking about communism generally, right? Like, the labor market is owned and controlled by a small group of billionaires. You cannot live in a society that is free under this structure. And you can't pretend as though you have freedom if every single job is owned by a group of old white men who collude with one another, right? Like, these guys are in bed with one another. It is a cartel system. And, like... And there are odd aberrations that come from it. Like the veneration of people who do shitty things in order to try to survive capitalism. Right? Like, this young kid put up, sold lemonade so that his classmate could have a wheelchair. And we're all like, oh, wow, entrepreneurial spirit. And, like, the whole rest of the world is like, that's fucked up. Like, that's fucked up. That, like... Kids are selling lemonade so that other kids can have fucking wheelchairs and shit. Right? We can't be free when we are alienated from our labor. Karl Marx or something. Yeah. Good theory, no epiphany. Good to see you too, bud. Good to see you. Have a good one, Alex. And for how long do you expect these people who made it through to last the way things are going economically? I just stopped by London Drugs midday here in the interior of the coast. You can smell the desperation in retail stores. I feel messed up coming out of there. Yes, I've been feeling that way too. No epiphany. I've been feeling that way too. Like, I don't like I won't go grocery shopping until I am out of food, right? Like, it's not casual. Like, it's not a casual affair. The people who are working in these establishments are obviously miserable, right? They're obviously stressed. They're obvious, like, and I need food, right? So that's the unfortunate reality of that. I would love to be able to say to my, like, local grocer, like, hey, can we, like, spread this labor out? Can we make it easier for everybody? But that's not how the society works. You have groups of people who don't work enough and can't pay the rent, and then you have groups of people who are working, like, double shifts every day, right? Just to barely pay the rent. And, like, it's just getting to be horrible to walk into these places and see these people suffering under this yoke. It doesn't need to be this way. It simply doesn't. Yeah, I was coached right in front of a customer by management for calling a lady a customer instead of a guest. Yeah, that's the target for you, exactly. And we wonder why there are so many of what we call the Karens, right? Like I love the Karens. You know, can I speak to the manager, please? Like this expectation that if I'm having an interaction with one of these customer service representatives, wage slaves, right, and I feel as though things are not going how I want them to go, I can always talk to the manager, right? And that is another form of reinforcement, right? And it's another form of disciplinary action against the working class. That these sort of childish people, these I want to speak to the manager types, are completely rewarded for being that way. Right? I had to go through a whole free program to get off drugs, have lots of hospital bills, but never refused to help. I mean, that's another thing, Kate. Like, why Why is America acting so slowly in regards to this healthcare issue? The entire rest of the world has like universalized healthcare systems and single payer healthcare systems, right? Yeah, I was just focused on helping the lady, not stupid language semantics, but that's what they do, right? Like, stupid language semantics matters a lot, right? Like, you're not a wage slave, you're an employee. Oh, you're not an employee, you're a customer service representative, right? Oh, you're not an employee, you're a partner, right? Like, stupid language semantics work. That's why they're used, right? They don't want to call you what you are, right? They're not gonna, they don't want to call themselves master, right? They don't call themselves bosses anymore, right? Because boss is the Dutch word for master, right? Or it's derived from the Dutch word for master. Like, so they're doing everything they can to change the language, but not the structure, right? And if you can get people to accept the system simply by changing things semantically, then it's a success, right? Then it's a complete and total success. Like, if you call their position like Premier Service Agent Extraordinaire, and they go, ooh, Premier Service Agent Extraordinaire, and then they accept $7.25 in your abuse every day, like, great. If that's all it takes, like, if that's all it takes. And yeah, absolutely, Kate. Like, rehabilitation programs need more attention. I mean, in the United States, you're saying you're in Ohio, right? Like, the healthcare system that exists in the United States does not exist elsewhere in the world. Like, there are small, impoverished nations, or nations that we would consider impoverished, that have robust, strong, free healthcare systems. Like, you don't even need to leave capitalism to find alternative healthcare models that are successful and work, right? You don't need to go to communism. You don't need to go anywhere else. And so the question becomes, what the fuck is wrong with America, right? Like, and it is as oblique as that. Like, what the fuck is wrong with America? Like, literally every other country had this shit figured out in the 60s. Like, what the fuck is going on? Why is this system of abandonment so reinforced and so present in America? It's incredible to me. Like, it's incredible. And then people turn around and defend that system. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, there's this tendency, I think, where people get so insulated, or they're isolated somehow, or they can't perceive anything. You know, I really want to do this. I really want to do this while I talk about this. I love these China walks. I do. Because and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, let's do the Great Wall. Like, we don't see things outside of our own bubble or our own society or our own structure. And we don't understand that, like, the world is big and vast and there's a lot going on in it. And there's this thing that happens called normalization, right? That, like, once something becomes normalized, the culture just accepts it, even if it's brutal, right? Then it just is how things are. And I think that's what's going on in the United States. That the idea that healthcare is withheld from people unless they sell themselves to the right capitalist, or prove their value, or prove their worth or something, has become normalized. It's become the way people communicate about these things. And we don't, and it's difficult to challenge them. It's difficult to challenge them because to challenge them means making yourself an outsider on purpose. And nobody wants to be the outsider in the society, right? Nobody wants to be the outsider in the society. Which is why typically those sorts of social changes come from the outsiders. Right? Come from people who are on the fringes of the society, who begin to talk in a way that gets accepted by the wider society. And this says nothing to those suffering under the imperial core, right? In the global south. Yeah, the global south is like, I mean, for God's sakes, like, we've got a genocide going on in Palestine. We've got a genocide going on in Yemen, right? The destruction of Libya, the destruction of Iraq, the destruction of Afghanistan, the coup in Ukraine, right? We're literally funding neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine currently after coupping their government so that we could fund neo-Nazi groups to go after the Russians, right? We're just like we've fomented a coup against the Egyptian people, right? After they put in their own leadership, after they had a public a revolution in order to depose them, we couped that government. And on it goes. And like Venezuela, for God's sakes, when they kidnapped Chavez. Bolivia, for God's sake, Elon Musk was tweeting. We have the tweet of him saying, we'll coup who we like. We'll coup who we like. Right? And like, and this isn't even to mention the history of slavery and genocide of the First Nations people and the black populations of Africa. Like, at what point do we start acknowledging that we are the bad guys here? Like, none of this needs to happen. We don't need to do this. Like, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Like, there's still something like 70,000 undetonated bombs and landmines in Laos that still kill people. People still stumble on these things. It still kills people today, right? It's like something from a sci-fi movie. Right? Like, it's like a fucking episode of Star Trek or something where there's this, like, ancient trap that blows up and kills people. And you're just like, at what point do we genuinely get to say something is going wrong? Like, something is wrong in our society, and we have to investigate it. It must be investigated, or we're just going to keep doing it. And if we just keep doing it, we're going to get isolated. The rest of the world is going to blow by us and leave us behind. And they'll be happy to do that. Because they'll be happy to say to the genocidal maniacs who are going around destroying the place, denying healthcare to their own people, denying education to their own people, denying a good quality of life to their own people, increasing homelessness, increasing poverty. The rest of the world is going to look at that and be like, yeah, bud, figure your shit out. Peace. Bye. We're going to bounce. Like, that is what's going to happen to North America. Like, it's going to go down that way. And the only response that we're going to have, unless we actually attempt to shift the way we're acting on the world stage, the only response we're going to have to this is extreme acts of violence that aren't going to work. Because the rest of the world is going to be able to build back faster than we can bomb them. Right? Like, we only have something like 400 million people, right? You compare that to even China alone, 1.6 billion. Like, and then suddenly, well, India's going to get involved. Suddenly Russia's involved, right? Suddenly the EU is going to be involved. Suddenly the African continent is involved. And like, as they build themselves up and actually start to figure out how to live in the world in a way that is rational and normal without grinding poverty, constantly holding them back, they're going to leave us alone and tell us to fuck off. And they're right to do so. They're right to do so. Like, we act like crazed maniacs. Like, but it's normal. Like, it's supposed to be normal. We're supposed to talk about American troops as if they're heroes. We're supposed to talk about all this stuff as if we're spreading freedom and democracy, and that's all fucking normal. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, it's getting so obvious now. Like, it's getting so obvious now. And we've got to do something about it. Like, we've got to do something about it. Because as it continues to get worse, as it must, like mathematically, 2 + 2 = 4, right? If the rent goes up and the wages go down, right? The system stops functioning. Like, do we see the rents going up? Do we see housing prices go up? Yes, indeed we are. Do we see wages even going up to meet this? Right? No, in fact, inflation and price gouging and price rises are actually chewing in to how much your wage is actually worth. And once this happens, the system stops working. It's designed to do it. It's happening right in front of your face. Like, I don't need to pull up huge articles or all this kind of stuff. Like, we know the housing market is happening. We know rents are skyrocketing. We know all of that. Have your wages gone up? No. it doesn't. You don't need to make a big argument for this. And so what's scary about what's going to happen in this next period of time, and there is a level of excitement because it could go the other way, but who are the people who are getting into the streets and organizing and shutting down infrastructure? Oh, it's these truckers, right? It's these truckers with connections to anti-vax movements and connections to far-right fascist organizations, right? Are the leftists getting mobilized that way? Are the leftists getting into the streets? Are the leftists building these sorts of things? I mean, some of them are. Right? Extinction Rebellion's a good one, right? The climate change movements that I've been a part of, right? And the movements are building and they're there, but as people get abandoned, as they must be, it's a structural inevitability at this point. As they're abandoned, many of them will gravitate to the right. Many of them will. And that's because we live in a society that has no class consciousness. We don't care to talk about class. We don't really talk about it. And so if you don't talk about class, then all you have left is gender politics. And if all you're doing is gender politics, then you got to protect white culture from the rising threat of immigrants. And they're taking our jobs. That kind of thing, right? And that'll be a solution. And all of this is familiar and predictable, right? We know why World War II happened. Like it's not and it's not outside of the norm of the conversation, right? Like we are talking about a death cult that attempts to resolve its issues through violence, right? That's how they resolve all of their issues, through domination, supremacy, what's called manifest destiny, right? In order to take over the planet and take over the resources from the people. It's maddening. It's maddening. And I'm supposed to just sit here and be like, yeah, normal society. Just get a better job, guys. Yeah, just get a better job. Just keep working. And like, I am to a point now where like, even if I could get a better job, I'm kind of looking at it being like, really? You want me to work this job, which is likely pointless? You want me to work this pointless job in order to continue facilitating this death cult that is going around committing genocide and destruction throughout the globe with my tax dollars. And then, oh, incidentally, while I waste my entire life doing that enterprise, climate change is going to come and destroy the whole thing. Like, no. Like, how much money do I need to be paid to ignore reality, right? And the answer for lots of people is not a lot, right? You don't need to be paid an awful lot to just completely ignore reality and completely ignore the fact that your job is funneling energy into this entropy of our mass extinction. Like, it's insanity upon insanity upon insanity. And the deeper and deeper and deeper you go into the well of insanity, the more reprehensibly crazed it becomes. And it isn't happening because of some like Machiavellian like it literally is just happening because the people who have control have detached from reality completely. Like they've just detached. They're just not part of it. Like they've created illusionary worlds where they can where they literally can groom out people and groom in people, right? Like they can literally surround themselves with yes men. And if you stand up and try to say like, hey, this entire system is built on exploitation, well, they're just going to get rid of you. They're not going to platform you. They're just going to silence you and get you out of the conversation because they don't want to hear it. They want to hear that everything's going hunky-dory and super well, right? And if you grumble, right, well, then they gaslight you, right? Just get a better job. Just get a better education. Just do all the stuff. Sure, the planet is going to die. Like, sure, the species is going to die, right? But just keep working, right? Just keep working. Yeah. When your town burns down, you'll have to relocate, right? Like, and don't tell me this normalization doesn't happen. Like, the school shootings that have occurred throughout the United States have become normal. Like, Literally, kids are picking up guns, walking into schools and shooting them up, and it's become normal. It's become just a part of living in America. That you're doing school shooter drills. They're talking about arming teachers. Like, this is something that we're all supposed to be like, yeah, normal society, living in normal kind of things. Yeah, there's always this looming threat of school shooting. Constant and persistent. Like, normal. No. How about no? Like, how about no? And the rot has gotten so deep and despicable that we are no longer able to simply reform it. Like, it's just not how it's going to go. We're not going to be able to say, like, oh, let's make a small change here and a small change there and all of this. And even those small changes that are being suggested, that they don't happen. Right? And why don't they happen? Because the corporate owners also own the politicians. And they don't want to change it. They don't care. Like, they don't care. And most importantly, and I've said this earlier, they're not capable of caring. Like, even if they wanted to care, they wouldn't know how to. Like, that's where we're at. That the owners of the society are incapable of caring, and even if they wanted to care, they wouldn't know how. Like, we've got to push through it, man. Like, we've got to push through this, like, this reefer madness level of propaganda that we are suffering under. Our ruling class is off the rails. Like, it's off the rails. And the species is going to pay for it in major, significant ways. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a corporation, right? Societies of control try to control your semiotic, symbolic order, keep it disorganized based on floating signifiers of power. Well, and also, like, you never know who your boss is. Like, you never meet your owners, right? That, like, unlike something like a king, right, where you know who is in control, like, you know who is at the top of this thing, you don't actually know who your owners are, right? And the stock market system is based in such a way to diffuse that kind of power, right? You don't know who owns your stock. You don't know who owns all of these things. You don't know who even is the ownership class in the first place, right? You don't know who your boss is. You never meet them. And that's part of the process of alienation. And it makes it difficult to organize against the ownership class if you never know who they are. And they're faceless, right? So it's a faceless kind of oppression that occurs. It's odious in my perspective. Like, in the Soviet Union, people knew who was in charge, right? The Communist Party in the Soviet Union was the party that was in charge, right? You could go talk to them. You could go meet with them. There were votes. You could discuss things with them, right? I almost guarantee that each and every one of you has never met your owner, right? Like, unless you're working in, like, a small business or a small family kind of endeavor or something like that, right, which still exist to the degree that they exist. But if you're working in a corporate enterprise, like, you've never met these people. And for many of them, you don't know who they are, right? And that itself is become normal. You just get a job at one of these major establishments where you never meet the people who are benefiting from your labor. And that's just normal. There's a cost to help. You can't get a job in psychology without going $500,000 in student loan debt unless you come from an affluent family. Yeah. And, like, it's no shock whatsoever that, like, why would people want to go into this massive debt for the chance at maybe getting a job, right? Like, it's what's starting to happen. And all of this is having profound and serious consequences in our society. Like, we are going to have, like, a decline in birth in this society. Like, we're going to go into a population decline. And when societies go into population declines, The ruling class, especially this ruling class that believes in growth, right? They're going to have a conniption over it. They're going to lose their minds about it. And we're all going to look at them and be like, yeah, dude, like, you have exhausted us. You have commodified us completely. You have made it so that everyone in the society has to work constantly in order to just get by, right? Not to own anything or have anything. Like, yeah, no big fucking shocker here, man. Like, no big fucking shocker. Millennials are having less sex than the boomers did, right? And it's not by small margins. Like, we're so fucking done with this shit. Like, we're so fucking done with this shit. I'm about to get my marijuana card here in Ohio. Holla holla. Oh, wow, there's lots of chat going on here. Lots of chat going on here. Didn't China contribute to genocide in the last couple of years? The Uyghur genocide is not a thing. Like, it's not a thing. Like, I'm going to make it as quick as I possibly can, Kate. Like, the West has besmirched China with this Uyghur genocide narrative, right, in order to deflect blame from their own genocides, right? North America is committing a genocide in Yemen. It's committing a genocide in Palestine, right? The occupied territories of Palestine. It's invading Afghanistan, invading Iraq, invading Syria, like invading Libya. Like, it's this looming aggressive monster that is doing massive damage. And so when there's a rising star on the global stage, they need to do what they need to do to try to tear it down in its own populace, so that when they act against it, people will be like, yeah, get China, ha ha ha. But the Uyghur genocide is a myth. It's a total myth. There's no evidence. Like, there's literally no evidence. All of the evidence they provide is like shots from like a satellite being like, oh, look at a building. But like, they literally send BBC crews into these establishments, right? They've had diplomats, people from the World Bank, like every single third-party organization that has gone into these facilities has walked out saying this is not a genocide. Every single one. Who are the people who are saying it's a genocide? Literally, like, fucking hack evangelical Christians saying I was sent by God on a mission to destroy China. Like, literally, and their evidence is, yeah, I went and talked to the terrorist organizations and they said there was a genocide going on. It's like, dude, like, that's nothing. Like, that's literally nothing. And they'll like come up with documents and be like, oh, look, I've got a document about how China's policies on how to deal with prisoners. They're evil. And it's like, literally, I'm like, dude, like, this is essentially the document that comes out of the West. Like, we have prisoners too, bro. Like, but they could be abusing it. Like, yeah, but they're like when people commit to genocides, they're open about it. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because everybody in the chat knows this, but like, when cultures commit a genocide, they don't do it in secret. Like, it's not secret. It's not like some secretive underground like kind of thing, right? It's done very openly. When the Canadians did the residential school system genocide here in Canada, it was voted on in Parliament, right? It's on the public record. When the Americans committed a genocide against the First Nations people, they were very open on it. They voted on it in Congress, in the Senate. It's on the public record. You can see it. When Adolf Hitler committed the Holocaust, he ascended to power holding a book saying, I would like to commit the Holocaust, right? It was open. It was understood. Everyone knew that's what he was going to do. It wasn't a secret. And so the claim that's coming out of the West in regards to the Uyghur genocide in China is that they are committing a genocide against millions of people without talking about it, without voting on it, without passing any legislation, without organizing to do it, without erecting any of the crucial infrastructure to do it, without sending around any documentation. There's no whistleblowers. There's nobody who's actually coming out and saying it. And in fact, all of the Muslim nations in the area are in support of the policies that the Chinese government is moving forward with in regards to the Muslims in their own society. Like, I don't know what you need. Like, I don't know what you need. Like, we are getting to a point where we are starting to say, like, it's that classic Mark Twain kind of line, right? It's easier to trick a person than it is to convince them they've been tricked. And that's essentially what's happening with this Uyghur genocide line, is that we're deceiving people actively, and then people like me are trying to convince you that you've been tricked. But it's harder. It's harder to convince you you've been tricked. Like, because there's nothing I can show you, because there's nothing to be shown. Right? And like, what do I need to show you the billions of dollars that the Chinese government has funneled in to help the Uyghurs? Do I need to show you that, like, the system that they're using, the vocational school system, is the same as the system that's being used in France? That's the system that inspired their own, right? Like, is France committing a genocide? It's the same fucking system. Like, this, and I understand why people don't want to believe that it's a false narrative, because they don't want to understand that their society and their culture is capable of telling such aggressive lies. And it's an aggressive lie. It's an enormous aggressive lie that the West is telling about China. Right? There's a reason why China's pissed off. Because we're telling this enormous, overt, aggressive lie. And is this a good way to deal with your neighbors? Is this a good way to deal with your neighbors? Right? Can you imagine if you were living in a community and there's just somebody going around telling egregious, enormous lies about you? Like, you'd be pissed. And you'd be right to be pissed. Something is wrong in every society. Sadly, I don't think perfection in this world exists. Yeah, that's true. And that's why I support USA military bases. Bases everywhere. They kind of babysit other countries. I mean, that's the colonial mindset, dude. Like, that's like, these countries don't need to be babysat. Why do we think that we have the right to babysit these people? Right? Like, many of these cultures and civilizations are 10 times older than ours. Right? Like, why do we feel we have the right or the need or any of this to babysit these people? Like, let them govern themselves. But we don't do that because we want their resources. Like, that's what it's about. Like, we're not babysitting other countries. We're stealing their resources. Like, that's what we're actually engaged in. That's what we're actually doing. We're not going in to Iraq because they're spreading democracy, and we're gonna go in there and turn around that backward culture, right? All them brown people don't know how to live like us good whites, right? Like, we want their oil. We want their oil. That's what it's all about. Like, anything else is just the propaganda. It's just the window dressing. We're not going in there to change their ideology. We're not going in there to spread democracy. We're not going in there to do any of that. We're going in there to get their fucking resources and take it for ourselves. And then make the claim that it's capitalism that generated the wealth, right? That we literally are stealing from other countries. And that's the role of these USA military bases. The goal of these military bases is to get into countries to steal their resources. And also there's even a more grotesque prevailing strategy, right? Which is, if you can't control a region, so take the Middle East, for example, formerly the Ottoman Empire, right? This used to be a fucking empire, by the way. Like, the Ottoman Empire, all through here, right? Dismantled post-World War I. All of these lines that you're seeing were made up by white guys, right? And in the case of places like Iraq, it was like a total fucking disaster. The Sunni Shiite split, all of that kind of shit. And the prevailing strategy in this region now is if we can't control it, i.e. if we can't own it, right, then we should destroy it. Because if we destroy it, then places like China and places like Russia, Kazakhstan, like Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, right, then they can't actually organize. And that's become the prevailing United States strategy in the region. Like, we go in, and we're not going in to babysit. We're going in to fucking destroy them, to steal their resources, and make it so that other countries can't trade and organize with them. Because as long as they're destroyed, then we remain on top. That's why China is such a threat, right? China is such a threat to the United States because we can't destroy it, right? Without significant blowback, right? Mutual self-destruction, all that kind of stuff. We can't destroy it, and we can't defeat it on the world stage because it's actually building stuff and trading. Like, pick up literally any object in your house. Find the made in sign, right? Chances are good it's going to say made in China, right? And the Chinese people are quite proud of this, and they should be proud of it. They still have a manufacturing base, right? And there's no sign that they're going to give that manufacturing base up. Like, that's the biggest thing. We gave our manufacturing base to China, right? And what did they do with it? They built their society up. They built a society, right? While we're doing what with our money? Spreading around military bases so that we can destroy countries, steal their resources, right? And then saying it's all for their own good, which is fucking brutal. Like, it's fucking brutal. Can you imagine if somebody acted like that to you? Can you imagine if some stranger you never met came from across town, kicked in your door, right? Sat in your living room, ate your food, right? Started taking money out of your purse. When you complained, they literally beat the shit out of you and shove you into the corner. And then they say it's all for your own good. Like, that's what's happening. And, like, again, we're supposed to act like this is all normal. It's fucking not. Like, it's fucking not. Like, leave these people alone. Let them organize their own societies. Allow them to make the mistakes that humans are going to make within the confines of their own borders. Or allow them to build the stable societies that many of them have already shown us they can build. Like, China's building a stable society, right? Many of the European nations are building more stable societies, right? And the Americans then go around and say, like, well, communism never works. It's like, yeah, communism never works because you keep fucking destroying it actively. Like, if you're so scared of it, like, if you're so convinced that it's going to fail, then why don't you just let it? Why do you got to work so hard on it? Empires fall. We are on the cusp of either the first wave of that fall or in the crest of the first wave. I don't know. I'm not the Simpsons. I can't predict history. Yeah. We are in that tedious moment in the game of Monopoly where there's only 2 players left. And everybody's just rolling and going around the board and rolling and going around the board and rolling going down around the board, right? And it takes a long time, right? Have you ever played a game of Monopoly and you're one of the people who's like been ousted from the game and you're watching them go through it and it's taking like an hour and they're just like rolling, moving, like passing money between each other, and nothing seems to be happening and it's all stagnation? Like, that's what's happening right now in this society. And step in when there's genocide, but like okay, so you know what the first place we should step in and prevent the genocide of? Is Israel. Or Yemen, right? And you know what we could really do to step in and actually prevent those genocides from occurring? We could stop funding it. Like, it's super, super weird. It's super, super weird that we believe that we can judge whether or not we need to step into another country based on the relations and the genocide that's going on within their own borders while we perpetuate our own. Like, it's hysterical to me. Like, maybe we should get to a place where we are no longer committing genocides, right? Before we start pretending as though the reason we are going into these regions is to prevent genocide. Like, that's the grotesquerie of it, is that we will say, there's a genocide going in there, and then go in to prevent the genocide, and then we will discover, oh, there wasn't actually a genocide. Just how we lied about the gas attack in Syria, right? Gas attacks in Syria, we got to go in. There were no gas attacks in Syria, right? The WMD lie in Iraq, right? That's the one that's become like formally understood by the populace. That if you're still walking around saying there are WMDs in Iraq, Iraq still got WMDs, then you're a kook. You're out of touch with reality, right? So they've lied about Syria. We know they've certainly lied about Iraq. The Nairia testimony in regards to Iran, right? That's how the Iran-Contra thing happened. It was a lie where a young lady who was the daughter of a politician, outright, or an ambassador or something, stood in front of the UN and outright lied about what was going on in Iran, and that created the Iran-Contra conflict, right? And it was a complete and total lie, right? We lie. We lie all the time about this kind of stuff. And so for a group of liars who do nothing but lie to stand up and say, oh, we're going to go in there because there's a genocide going on, stop believing them. Like, there's no reason to. All they've ever done is lie to you. It's all they've ever done. And if you're going to insist that what they say might actually be true at some point, and actually be like, yeah, it's totally fine to have all these military bases to prevent these genocides that occur, even though we are the most genocidal nation on the planet at the moment, right? Like, we are the most genocidal nation on the planet at the moment, without a doubt. Like, it's not even close. Like, it's not even close. Not even remotely close. And and you're telling me that we should maintain these military bases to prevent other genocides, but we don't care. Like, what evidence do we have to show that we care about preventing genocides? We love genocides. We do them all the time. We're currently doing them. Right? Like, we're currently doing them. America is built on genocide, right? There was a whole people here when we moved in and obliterated them, right? Like, there was a whole people on this continent that we enslaved and then moved in and built America with them. Like, we love genocide. We love it. It's part of the Western ethos. It's part of Western civilization. We love genocide. We love slavery. Which is why we keep doing it. And so this idea that we're going to be like, yeah, we're morally going to actually prevent a genocide somewhere else. Nah, bro. In my opinion, the thing that is wrong in virtually every society is the greed of your local oligarchy, yeah? Like, let the people have control. U.S. military presence perpetuates genocide, not prevents, exactly. I disagree. As far as I've ever seen the U.S. intervenes on genocide, where? The U.S. military abroad is to reinforce their hegemony. Yeah, the U.S. was built on genocide. Is it genocide? I don't want to bring up the colonizations of the natives, to be honest. I just disagree. Oh, not history. The natives. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Genocide here. Funded completely by the American state. Genocide here. Funded completely by the American state. Genocide on the United States-Mexico borders. Literally concentration camps full of kids. Like, literally. Like, straight up. And they're not releasing them. Like, they actively separate them from their families. So sometimes they separate the kids from their families and then kick the families back out into Mexico and keep the kids. Right? Like, it's fucking insane what's happening on the border here. Right? Like, we don't need to get into the First Nation conversation. Like, we don't need to do that. We can just talk about the things that are actually happening today. Right? And as long as you just ignore those things, you can pretend like America's trying to do good in the world. When it's obviously not. Like, obviously not. Like, I feel like what I'm doing is having a conversation with somebody who's getting beat up by their boyfriend, and I'm trying to convince them that it's not normal or good to be beat up by your boyfriend. And the response that I'm getting back is, but I love him and he does such good things for me. And I was just like, does he? Is he doing good things? Looks kind of like a psychopath to me. Looks kind of like a fucking psychopath to me. I know 2 communists, part of the trucker rally protest. They see it as a start of something bigger, maybe a yellow vest kind of protest to end neoliberalism in Canada coming up soon. It does have that potential, Vince. It does have that potential. And I mean, it has the potential to become something bigger. My question is, what is it going to be? Right? Because I do think a lot of these guys, and I said it earlier, a lot of these guys are just doing it because they're like Denny's. Like, let's get back to Denny's. Come on. I miss my mom and pop shops. What do you got? Don't worry, there's more than one genocide that helped build the U.S. empire. Yeah, I am a native. I hate needing to say that for validation, though. Yeah, and I mean, I had a thing that I wanted to say about that, and it's flittering away on me, and all of that kind of stuff. I understand what you mean, right? Like you do want to just be heard as a person, and I feel as though there is kind of like an odd like coming over the top or something about it. No. It's okay, we can agree to disagree that people are genocided, hun. Kiss back to brunch. We genocided them and confined the survivors to concentration camps and stripped them of any rights, but I just don't agree with that. It doesn't matter if you're native, doesn't change history. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, we're talking about just history. Every single tribe's operated much more harshly. The whole world was fighting for leadership. I mean, that's debatable. Liberal identity politics doesn't matter with history. Conquest masked as liberation, is genocide. I'm Cherokee and Choctaw. Cherokee were mostly nice. If you walked into a Choctaw tribe, you would be scalped. But how much of that is just myth-making, right? Like, how much of that is just myth-making? As The Rock would say, it doesn't matter what your opinion is, yeah. No, I don't think Kate is a bot. I think Kate's figuring things out. I don't mind talking to Kate. Like, it's kind of nice, in fact, because I think Kate's asking questions and being kind of pretty nice about it, honestly. Like, it helps sharpen me. Like, because I know that I'm going to have these conversations with people who genuinely don't give a fuck about whether I survive or not. And I get the feeling that Kate feels as though I should survive, right? Feels as though I should be able to live. I just wonder where's the line between all tribes of North America versus the rest of the world. Sold their own slaves, fought for land. Like, no one is going to deny the history of humanity, right? You can just, like, open a Bible to see all of this, right? Like, yeah, so, like, slavery and all this kind of stuff. But none of that means that we need to continue doing it or accepting it, right? None of that means, like, the whole idea is that we stop doing it. That's the whole concept. And to come to a place where we know that we can do that, right? Like, we no longer sacrifice people, right? There's something that's documented in the Bible. Like, we no longer take people, put them on slabs and stab them in the chest and take out their intestines, put them in a bowl and hold them up to the God and being like, let's have a good harvest. Like, we don't do that anymore. Why? Because we got over it. Like, we figured out that that's probably not the way to do things, right? Like, we no longer actively, to large degrees, like, I mean, this still happens from time to time, but, like, we don't condone, like, buying people, right? People are not to be commodified directly. Like, we don't crucify people. We used to crucify people, for God's sakes, right? You take like, during the Roman period, it was normal. The practice that had been normalized is taking criminals and nailing them to posts and then holding them in public, right? Parading them around in the public sphere, putting them on hills, putting them along roadways so that people could see crucified people steadily die. Like, just because something is doesn't mean it needs to continue this way. And what's frustrating about the United States position on it is that we have so much resources, we have so much that we could begin acting with this egalitarian mindset. And are there other people in the world that are acting a little bit more reasonably and rationally? Yeah, there are. And you can see them. Like, it doesn't need to be this way, and that's the whole point. I do not believe slaves exist today as they did before. Yeah, I mean, like, before it was, like, enshrined, and when we say before, we're talking about, like, 100 years ago, right? Like, not a very long period of time. Well, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, right? Like, it's a process. It takes time. And it's not good enough to simply shrug and be like, well, this is the way it's always been. I don't accept it. Yeah, Canada's history isn't all that different, really. Yeah, we're all slaves to the capital. We are all slaves to the capital movement. Like, I mean, we are existing under a wage slave system. That's for sure. And it's not good enough to say, well, it's better than chattel slavery. It's like, yeah, okay, so, like, feudalism was better than tribalism. Like, I mean, but so? Like, does that mean that we stop? No. Yeah, y'all see Biden talking about increasing police funding? Yeah, of course. Because he's the moderate, right? I hope France wakes up and elects a leftist instead of a far-right neoliberal Macron. If Europe cannot go left, then capitalism will reign supreme. I mean, there's a big threat of that. The Europeans are deathly afraid of what they're seeing in America. Like, they're deathly afraid of it. Like, what happened the last time this sort of thing occurred? Their country was destroyed, right? Like, that was not that long ago, right? Like, their cities were burnt down, torn down to rubble, right? Like, if I'm the European continent and I'm seeing what's going on in the Republican Party and even the Democratic Party, I'm starting to get a little like, especially like the people of Germany, right? And the German politicians, they're acutely aware. Like, they know that they're not ignoring the signs and any of this kind of stuff. And when Joe Biden came to power and said America's back, right? America's back, baby. The response from Europe was for how long? Right? That's not an elicitation of confidence. That's not a group of people being like, yeah, sweet, America's back, let's go. Right? Like, no. If anything, Europe is feeling very shaky, very, very shaky. And seeing Biden talking about like increasing police funding, like seeing these sorts of things, it's terrifying. Like, it's terrifying for a country that went through 2 capitalist wars that destroyed the continent, right? Like, it's terrifying to be a European if I'm paying attention to American politics. Like, it's terrifying, and there doesn't seem to be anything even attempting to stop it. Pelosi announced re-election 2 hours ago. Yeah, Bidenism is just Trumpism with better PR. Yeah. Well, and their whole shtick is just be boring, right? We would be more slaves to an overfed government. I feel that it would easily become corrupt. I think communism as an idea is utopia. I mean, I think it's fair to say that there have been utopians within the communist conversation, but, like, proof's in the pudding, right? Did you know that the communist country of Cuba has more doctors per capita than Canada? Oh, sorry. Did you know that the communist country of Cuba has more doctors, period, than Canada? They've got 1/3 of our population. They've got more doctors than we do. Right? Like, by what metric is this utopian? Right? Like, the Soviet Union pulled its country from, like, a feudal agricultural society to become the strongest, most powerful economy of the century. First into space, defeated the Nazis. Like, by what metric is this utopian? right? And yes, it's succumbed to Western corruption. Like that's why the Soviet Union falls. It succumbs to Western corruption, and and now we're seeing with China, Vietnam, Thailand, North Korea, like the communist projects are benefiting the people in big and significant ways, like big and significant ways, and like there's. I just think you've got to put your head in the sand to not pay attention to it. Like in Russia, to this day, your healthcare is paid for, your school's paid for. What happens in the States? Is that utopian? Is it utopian to say that like, hey, healthcare should be paid for like it is everywhere else in the world, communist or otherwise? Hey, schooling should be paid for. Like it is in China, like it is in Russia, like it is in fucking Mexico. Like we get caught up in this idea of like communism is a utopia, but it's an attempt to improve the society. Like that's not utopian. We've improved the society many times before. We've improved the society many times before. Was it utopian when we got rid of monarchs? Was that utopian? Right? Like it's not utopian to want to transfer from one system to another. It's not utopian to try to pursue more egalitarian systems that work for the benefit of the populace. It's not utopian. Like it would be utopian if you presented it as if it's going to be like a perfect glittering golden thing. But you know who actually does that? Capitalists. Right? Like capitalists are the utopians in the conversation. They're the ones that are pretending like their system that doesn't work, that is a religious ideology, that's not based on reason, rationale, science, evidence, facts, any of that stuff. And they're doubling down on it, and it's failing, and they're turning around saying that this is the greatest system that the world has ever produced. These guys were literally saying at one point that this is the end of history. Like, do you understand how like arrogant and detached from reality you have to be to say that the system that you're living in is the end of history? That they're literally in a system that says that we need to grow infinitely, right? The system can grow infinitely, but not the social structures, right? That your resource base and your economic system can grow infinitely, but not your social systems. And not the way we interact with one another, and not the way we talk to one another. Like, oof. I think it can 100% happen 200, 300 years from now, just not within the next 100. We need to lay the framework ASAP so we can fight for a better future. If Honduras went left, Canada can too. I believe the only freedom we got on this corrupt planet is have with less government and human rights enforced. Well, it doesn't matter if you've got more or less government. Who owns the government? That's the question, right? It doesn't matter how big or small your government is. That's a misleading, like that's a dead end. What matters is who owns the government, right? And if you have billionaires in your society, your government is owned by the billionaires. And this grift that's being run on us, where the billionaire class turns to us and says the problem is government, while they simultaneously own all of the politicians within the government. So they're trying to get you to scapegoat the government that they own, so that you'll turn to them and say, oh, please rule us, daddy, right? But they own the system that they themselves dismantle. So it's a total fucking grift. Like, and this idea that like you're not going to be more or less free in a capitalist society if there's less or more government, as long as that government is owned by this oligarch class. And so I just, we've got to get away from this conversation of like smaller government. Like I'm a small government conservative, like, but you want the government, small or big, to be owned by the billionaire class, so it doesn't matter. It's just another way to not talk about the class issue. It's just another way to deflect from the actual issue that's actually happening, to talk about government as if it big and small or any of this kind of stuff matters at all. I hope Yanis Varoufakis wins one day in Greece. I mean, he did win. He resigned. Like he won. He resigned. Right? Once he realized that it was there was no solution to be had. Right? And a Corbynite win in UK. I mean, don't hold your breath. Who enforces human rights then? I mean, ultimately it comes to the people, right? It is the people. Honduras went left and Chile went a bit more left-wing than before. Need more populism and protests to happen worldwide. From truckers to yellow vests, we must end neoliberalism. I said neoliberalism. That's great. Cuba is not a nice place to be. Completely disagree with that. I've been to Cuba. Like, yeah, it's a poor place. Don't get me wrong. But everybody is in it together. There's a real sense of solidarity that exists in Cuba. The people seem happy. And if we just lifted the sanctions on Cuba, they would immediately, like, the thing that's holding Cuba back are these sanctions and the fact that they don't have access to tools. That's really what it is. All right, you guys are having like a real back and forth, and I think I'm not going to take the time to sift through it. Look at you, Kate. See how much discussion you're inspiring, though, Kate. See how much is happening. And guys, as long as it's polite, as long as it's cordial, as long as it's back and forth, and all of this kind of stuff, like I don't mind this at all, right? I don't mind this at all. It's when things get snippy, insipid, insulting. That's when I'm going to be kind of mad. Cuba tourism is not Cuba itself. Like, you know they let you walk around Cuba, right? Like, you can just go walk around Cuba and, like, see Cuba. And people invite you into their homes. Like, it's a very open society. Like, to get there, there's a lot of checks and balances. Like, you're coming into another country, makes sense. But, like, once you're there, it's very open, right? It's a very open society. I know, right, buddy? I know. Peanut butter. I'm not paying any attention to you. Right? I'm staring into this mystical, magical box. What's up with the mystical magic box, John? Yeah, and I mean, like... No, Cuba was beautiful. Cuba was beautiful, and the people were wonderful. Like, that was what really struck me about Cuba, is how lovely the people were. That my time in Cuba was very short. Like, I was only there for a week. But what I saw there was a country that was really suffering from the sanctions. Like, the sanctions that have been put on the country mean that they can't get access to pretty basic things that we take for granted, right? Like, we take for granted of the idea that you can just get access to, like, a Dremel, right? We can get access to small tools and things like this, electric tools, like... I'll never forget. Like, I went to a fellow's house, right? I went to a fellow's house, and Kate, that's usually the best strategy, right? The best strategy is just to be like, I don't know anything about it. I need to find more evidence to back up my claims. Like, that's the best strategy usually. I do that all the time because there's so much. There's too much, you guys. There's too fucking much. Anyway, Cuba. When I was in Cuba, we went to a fellow's house, right? He invited us there for dinner because he was absolutely lovely. And while we were there, we noticed he was tiling his floor, right? And he's tiling his floor, and my dad notices that there's like a little hammer and chisel in the corner and a little circle on one of the tiles, and he says, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I've got to get a hole in this particular tile so that it can slide over this pipe here, and then we're going to install like a sink or something right here." And Dad was like, "Oh, okay, cool. How long is that going to take you, do you think?" And the guy was like, "Well, I've been chipping away at it for a couple of days now. It'll probably be a couple more days." Right? And Dad was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, all right." And when we left their house, they were lovely people. Dad looked at me and he said, "You know that tile project where the guy's saying he needs to chip away at it very steadily over time? Get a Dremel, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, right? So if literally there was a Dremel in Cuba and somebody with a Dremel was walking around Cuba being like, hey, like you can just like do stuff with a Dremel. But because of the sanction regime, they don't have access to tools. They don't have access to markets where they can buy these sorts of things, nor do they have the manufacturing in order to do it. And in fact, because of the sanctions, it's a total job killer for the Cubans. There are factories in Cuba that are not working, that are not in production. There are plantations in Cuba that they don't plant because they don't have the markets. So if the Americans just lifted the sanction on Cuba and stopped saying to the rest of the world, yeah, if you trade with Cuba, we're going to blow you up, right? We're going to, well, what do you think's going to happen? They're going to ramp up production. You're going to get your cigars, you're going to get your rum, you're going to get your sugar, right? And it's just going to come out of Cuba. It's going to make them a much better country. And so, like, when you're talking about poverty in Cuba, you cannot disconnect it from the realities of the empire, that the empire is oppressing them. It was about this team that attempted to travel to more poverty side of Cuba. They secretly vlogged their experience and were confronted by government to leave. The area is not ever... Well, yeah, like, governments will absolutely... Because what do you think that like, they are aware that propaganda is a weapon, right? Like, when Westerners come in and seek to propagandize their country, they're going to tell them to stop. And I think that is normal. It is normal that bad faith actors in the conversation are going to use specific events in order to inflate the narrative that they want, which is the narrative that they want is that the poverty that you're seeing is the result of the communist regime and has absolutely nothing to do with the sanctions. Has absolutely nothing to do with the sanctions, right? Like, come on. Like, come on. Like, they're a small island nation of 100 million people, and they're disconnected from the global market. They're left to fend for themselves for the most part. But why be afraid unless you want to protect an image to encourage? Why be afraid of people propagandizing your society when you're off the coast of the largest, most aggressive psychopathic empire in the world? Like, hey, look at all the poverty that exists in Cuba. We should invade it and ameliorate the poverty, right? Just like you say, we should go in and prevent the genocide. Well, look at all the poverty that the communists are doing. We should go in and overthrow their government. Yeah, they need more help and support, and the best way to help and support them is to lift the sanction regime. You cannot claim that you want to help a country while you are putting sanctions on the country. Do you understand how that's incoherent? You cannot put sanctions on a country and then claim you want to help and support them. You can't do it. It's incoherent. Like, lift the sanctions. If you actually care about the poverty, if you actually care about these things, lift the sanctions. And yeah, like the video I shared in the live stream, ask yourself what Cuba was like before their revolution. Yeah, that too. It's as simple as this, Kate, that since the Cuban Revolution, right, the United States has put sanctions. Sanctions are an act of war, right? They're a trade war, right? It's a form of siege warfare, right? That companies cannot trade with Cuba. Why? Because if they trade with Cuba, the United States will say, we are no longer trading with you. And for decades and decades and decades, the United States has been the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the planet. That if you have a company, a global company, and you want to trade with America, right? And ostensibly the rest of the world that has money and is able to do so, right? Well, you're not going to trade with Cuba. Straight up. So what this means is that the goods that Cuba are able to produce, right? Rum, sugar, cigars, tobacco, right? These are the goods that they're able... Why so many Cubans? Because they're communist, bud. Like, because they had a communist revolution. They fought against the Americans. They ousted many of the landlords and landowners. There's a huge movement in Miami full of people who are the ancestors of the people that Fidel Castro literally ousted from the island, right? During the Cuban Revolution, in order to get rid of these capitalists, in order to get rid of these people. And the USA wants Cuba to fail. Of course they want it to fail. And the truth is that in spite of this, the Cuban people have been resilient and have built strong, powerful social systems. And so the Cuban people can't trade their goods on the market. Why? Because the United States isn't permitting anybody to trade with them. This is starting to break down. Why is it starting to break down? Because China doesn't give a fuck about those sanctions. And now China is getting wealthy enough that it is saying to Cuba, hey, trade with us. Trade with us. Get your rum, get your sugar, get your stuff in here so that you can turn around and buy tools, so that you can turn around and buy lumber, so that you can turn around and buy copper, right? So that you can turn around and buy all of these things that your island nation doesn't have access to. That's the whole point of trade. And the reason why they can't get out of this poverty situation that they're in is because they can only do so much with the resources that they have access to, and they're not given access to any other resources. That's changing. If you can't support yourself, how will it be successful if dependent? I don't think I understand that statement, Kate. Like, the Cuban people are definitely supporting themselves, but they're supporting themselves with the resources they have. And there's a wider global market that they're simply not allowed to associate with. That's starting to break down. Like, you are going to see Cuba grow and become more prosperous because of its connection to China. And China is going to trade with Cuba, get access to the rum, the sugar, the cigars, all of those luxury goods, right? They're going to come into China, and Cuba is going to turn around and trade for tools. To me, it's about tools. Like, that's the biggest thing that I saw in Cuba. I was just like, where's the tools? Where's the tool? Where's the power drill? Right? Just a drill. Something that you could literally buy for $20 at a Home Depot or like a Walmart. Just like, where's the hand drill? Oh, we don't have those here. Well, why not? Because of the fucking sanction regime. Isn't that market capitalism based? Markets are markets. Like, markets are not anything. Like, they're like a market is just a market. A market is not capitalism, feudalism, tribal, communist. A market is a market. The capitalists have worked very, very hard to try to convince people that the defining characteristic of capitalism is markets. But every society has used markets. Feudal societies use markets. Tribal societies use markets. Markets are ubiquitous. They supersede, right? They supersede the political structure. A market is a market. And it is that simple. A market is a market. And the question that arises when you're talking about markets and capitalism is who is the primary beneficiary of the market? Who owns the market? Who in the end gets the lion's share of what is produced by the market? Right? And in the capitalist system, the answer to that question is the ownership class. Right? Free markets, I'm all for. I feel that is the beginning of capitalism. The beginning of capitalism is the exploitation of the working class by the ownership class. That is the defining characteristic of capital. That there is a class that Marx called the proletariat, and there is a class called the bourgeoisie, right? Or if you prefer, the owners and the workers. And yeah, the people should dictate the laws in the market. Yeah, but that's not what capitalism does. And that's not how capitalism operates. That capitalism begins by an ownership class seizing control of the means of production, seizing control of the manufacturing of what can and cannot be built, right? And getting So what is communism in the same short context? Well, communism would be the breaking apart of the ownership class and the obliteration of the ownership class and what they call the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? That the far right reactionaries, the ownership class, is simply not allowed to participate in the political apparatus. That the political apparatus is run exclusively by the working class, on behalf of the working class, for the working class. So that the goal is ultimately the dismantling of the class system entirely. And that there is no bourgeoisie left. That it is simply just workers working on behalf of workers. Who does the power go to? The people. The people, ultimately. Right? If you erect a democratic system that only responds to the people, yeah, absolutely, Kate. Honestly, I feel like you're just sharpening this. This episode is just turning into like, let's do the basics. And I got to tell you, it's always good to go through the basics. It really is, right? Because sometimes I get into a place where I think to myself, like, wait, am I bullshit? Like, is this all bullshit? Am I talking about bullshit? And then I go through the basics, and you go through the fundamentals, right? And I know that there are probably people in my chat, some of the long-term viewers, right, who are probably like, come on, John, this is all the basics. This is fundamentals. We've all been through this. Well, you know what? Let's do the fundamentals. Let's go through the fundamentals, because the fundamentals are important. It's you think like a cellist. Think about like a cellist like Yo-Yo Ma, right? Kind of an obscure reference, but a good one all the same, right? Like Yo-Yo Ma practices his scales every single day, right? Every single day he sits down and just goes do 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 with his cello, right? Over and over and over and over and over again, right? And if you were to ask him, why do you do that? Like you're this expert professional, like you've been doing it for years, all this kind of stuff. Like why do you sit down for so long and do these scales? It seems so basic. And he goes, it's fundamental, right? And so you got to go through your fundamentals. Like, and this, and today what we're doing right now are the fundamentals, right? But that's okay. That's okay. Like, the United States does not have class consciousness. Like, and what that means is that the people who live in the United States do not understand or articulate or look around the world as if there is an ownership class that is a class, right? A class of people, and then beneath them, there's the working class, right? And if you don't see that class dynamic, if you're not conscious of the class dynamic, then you can fall into all kinds of odd little traps, like Jordan Peterson does. What would I say is the fundamental issue with Jordan Peterson? He doesn't have a material analysis of his society. Like he doesn't have a material or historical analysis of his society, and so it leads him into extremely racist positions, like really, like all you have to do to understand that Jordan Peterson is kind of off on the fringes, honestly, is understand that he denies the existence of the white supremacist culture that certainly exists, right? Like, take for example, he wrote an article recently, right, in the National Post. I did a whole clip about it. I did a whole thing about it. And his position, so when the universities went through the civil rights movement, they started to ask themselves, why are the universities all white? And they all said to one another, okay, we're going to try to diversify. We're going to get more diverse people in, and we're going to do a diversity movement to try to get more people into the school that are diverse so that we can reflect more accurately the society that we actually live in, right? And so for decades, the universities were like, great, diversity, let's go, diversity, all that kind of stuff. And what we found is that diversity actually got worse, right? The universities didn't improve in terms of how diverse their culture was. It didn't improve in terms of any of that kind of stuff. And so some researchers started to ask themselves, well, why fucking not? Why not? And the answer that they came up with was twofold, right? Factor one, there is such a thing as implicit bias, right? That we have analyzed, that we have discovered, and that we know exists, right? A straight white man will gravitate to a straight white man, and he won't do it actively. It's just implicit inside of his perception of the world. The clearest example of this that we have found is you'll send a home appraiser into a house where all of the pictures on the wall are black families, right? And they'll appraise the house at, let's say, $300,000. And then they leave. They change all the pictures in the house to be white people. And then they send in an appraiser, and the house gets appraised at $400,000, right? This is an example of implicit bias. And it is as simple as people gravitate to what they are familiar with. People give the benefit of the doubt to people they are familiar with, right? Whereas they look at people they are not familiar with suspicion, right? And that plays in the society. And so so if you're living in a society as a person of color, and you are aware of this idea of implicit bias, and you are aware that white culture looks down on you, which you are made aware of as a person of color, and then you turn around and are told, oh yeah, you got to take $100,000 worth of debt in order to not get a job through this university because of implicit bias, well, you're just not going to do it, right? You're just not going to do it. And so the answer that comes out of the universities is this, that there are economic pressures that have been put on people of color in the country, as well as along with this concept of implicit bias, that we should make people aware of, and we should talk about, and we should be aware of, and so that we can try to work together and get through it. And yes, I think just as we mandated segregation, we also probably need to mandate diversification. That if we want to get away from the evils and the difficulties that segregation brought us, then we need to go into a period of mandating diversification. And that's where they've ended up. And so that's their side of it. Jordan Peterson's argument is that the reason why there aren't more black people or people of color in the universities is because they're less competent. He's explicitly stated that. And as long as you deny the history of the civil rights movement and the history of the university's struggle with diversification, the history of segregation, the history of redlining, the history of the economic abandonment of the black people from the project of prosperity, as long as you ignore all that, then you can believe it. And you can also believe that you're not being racist when you very explicitly are. Because your statement is black people and people of color and gay people and women are less competent. That's fundamentally what he says. So my critique of men like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro are that they don't have a material or historical analysis that's coherent. And as long as you accept that, then sure, they can make some sense. And like, especially Peterson, but Shapiro to a degree. Peterson makes sense on a like one-to-one, like pull up your bootstraps. I fundamentally have to disagree, especially like with Peterson, it's a little bit more subtle, but Shapiro is a racist. Like Shapiro is a brutal racist. Like some of the shit that he said on his Twitter feed where he's like called for the death of Arabs and shit, right? Like brutal. Just brutal. Like with Peterson, you kind of it's like racism through omission, right? He is the perfect case study of implicit bias, right? That implicit bias is completely built within his ethos and his worldview, and that implicit bias comes from his denial of the history of the civil rights movement and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, no, and Ben Shapiro is indefensible in my view. Like some of the shit that he has said is overt racism. Like it's not this other form of racism that Peterson finds himself in, where he's falling into the trap of implicit bias, making statements that people of color are less competent than white people, and that's the reason why we're here. No. Ben Shapiro is a fucking racist, like brutal. There's if you really want like a really really crisp takedown that is quite entertaining, you want some more news, Ben Shapiro. Like, this is it right here. Perhaps Ben Shapiro shouldn't be taken seriously by anyone about anything. Like, and also how Ben Shapiro pretends nothing can be done about systemic racism. Like, this guy, Cody Johnson has nailed Ben Shapiro to the wall. Like, absolutely. Like, absolutely. And what his commentary and his thoroughness in regards to the issue is, if you really want to pierce the veil and see what's going on with Ben Shapiro, there you go. Like half my it's called white trash a lot. Yeah. Living in the worst poverty areas of the city, etc. What makes them different? But now we're getting into the conversation of what I would like to talk about more, right? Like, I don't actually care to talk about, like, and this is because I am a privileged white man. Like, without a doubt, I can say that with clarity. That I want to talk about class dynamics, right? I want us to talk about how, like, the worst thing that could happen to the American ruling class is if the poor whites, poor blacks, and poor Hispanics allied on class lines. Like, if that happened, it would be a death knell. It would be the end of the American ruling class. Like, and that's why they need to create these wedge conversations and find wedges to break, to put between white people and black people and all of these different racial groups, which, like, exist strictly based on, like, the color of skin, which the more you think about it and the deeper you go, you're just like, it's so stupid. Like, it's annoying how stupid it is. But it's what's in front of us, and it's real. Are you going to tune into Jackson Hinkle versus Sam Cedar debate tomorrow morning? Probably not. God bless both of them. I'm sure there'll be like a highlight reel or something that I'll take a look at, but I don't know. It's just, I just don't know that I'll see anything surprising. You know what I mean? And I'm busy, JC. I'm busy. I'm too tired. I'm so tired. Yeah, for starters, Ben outright denies systemic racism, right? Defends Israel, one of his books. Forgot which one on the top of my head. He justifies a police officer killing an 8-year-old because it wouldn't comply. Thought he had a gun, right? I don't think it's a color issue as much as a community issue right now. See, Kate, that's a very class-based statement, right? Like, it is community, right? And the breakdown of our communities is overt and obvious and in front of us, right? And so, while it's important to be aware of racial issues and how racism is going on, I think you also have to be having a class conversation within that structure. But I see more accusation of white privilege when it's just not right. I mean, I don't know. Like, getting white people to think about their white privilege, like, yeah, that should happen a lot. Like, it's a pretty significant issue, in my view. Is like, it's like, how do you convince someone that a system is destroying people if you deny the existence of that system in the first place, right? And the denial of that system exists because you are a beneficiary of it and it's never antagonized you. And so you don't see it that way, right? It's very much like if you had a friend, right? You have a friend, and anytime you interact with that friend, he's helpful. He's doing everything he can to do nice things for you, right? Maybe he gives you gifts, right? You have little jokes. He sends you memes. Like, every interaction you have with that person is lovely, right? And in fact, you find them to be quite helpful. But then you go and talk to other people, and they're talking about him like, man, this guy's crazy. Like he's absolutely off the rails. Like the shit that he's doing to me is unbelievable. Like he burnt down my house. Like he kicked my dog. Like and they're telling you these kinds of stories, and you look at your buddy and you're like, him? Like he's so nice and helpful. I don't see any of that. Like what are you talking about? And then you go and talk to that guy, and that guy goes, yeah, those people are just being crazy, dude. Like you wouldn't even believe it. Like think about the stuff I have to deal with all this. Like they're nuts, and you're kind of like, yeah, maybe you're right. But then you take out the view, right? You go in a more meta view, and he is acting that way. He is going around and destroying other people. He is going around and doing this. He's just nice to you. And so you don't see it because you've never been confronted by it. So you are privileged. You are living in a position of privilege. You have the privilege of being treated nicely by this person, right? While everybody else is running afoul of them. And if you live in a position of privilege, you have a really hard time acknowledging that the system that you're benefiting from is doing harm to others. That's really how it rolls. Hinkle and Cedar, where's the daylight? I got to tell you, good for Jackson Hinkle. That's my big commentary on Hinkle and Cedar. That I've seen so many of these kinds of debates that I just don't think it's. Yeah, the debate is going to be entertaining. It's fun to engage live. I don't know. I'm happy. I'm happy for people who want to engage and who want to be part of it and all this. I just think I'm too old. Like really. Like I've seen Hinkle versus Cedar like several times, right, in my life. And it's gonna be like, it'll be entertaining, it'll be fun, and honestly, like, good for Hinkle. Like, I think that the big, in my perspective, the big narrative coming out of that debate is that Jackson Hinkle is really establishing himself as a person within the community. And good for him. He seems like a good kid. Like, he really does. Like, he seems like a good kid. He seems like he's really trying. I think that he is more like a gossip channel. Like, I think that he's more like a gossip channel. But that's okay, right? I think that that's kind of a natural evolution of how this is all going. And yeah, if people want to watch it and have fun with it and all that kind of stuff, I just know that I don't think... I wouldn't actually enjoy it. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, I think I'll wait until, like... Especially Hinkle, because if I was Jackson Hinkle, I would be like, I had a debate with Sam Cedar. Look at this debate I had with Sam Cedar. Hey guys, did you see the Sam Cedar debate? Guys, you wouldn't believe what Sam Cedar said, right? Like, if I was him, I would milk the fuck out of that. For sure. I would milk the shit out of a connection debate with Sam Cedar, and he should. And I know that Jackson Hinkle is going to come out with like a smaller clip kind of thing, like a half hour maybe, and I'll probably watch that. Because I don't mind if Jackson Hinkle wants to show me the best that he's got, especially against somebody as well established as Sam Cedar, who I find Sam Cedar to be largely inoffensive, right? Like, he doesn't really say anything that makes me go like, whoa! And Cedar has really positioned himself as being like a liberal leftist, kind of centrist in that sort of territory, right? Like, he's still kind of pro-Democrat. He's still establishment. He's still all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. You're not wrong. You're not wrong, JC. You're not wrong. So, enjoy that. Send my regards. Send my regards to the man. So when does skin color privilege override other privileges? There's family privilege, intelligence privilege, able-bodied privilege, mentally sane privilege. It goes on forever. Yeah, no, but that's true. It does. Like, there are many different ways. Like, the able-bodied privilege is absolutely one, right? Like, I work with disabled people in protests and all this kind of stuff, and like, these people are told every single day, just get a job. Right? These people are told like all of the time, right? Just go get a job, just like go like, you can do it, right? And like it's the kind of thing that you would say to a disabled person if you had never had any interaction whatsoever with what disability actually means and what it means to actually have a disability. Like it's very, very frustrating. Like, it's very, very frustrating because to get to that place where you see that you've got the privilege requires a great deal of humility. It requires a great deal of humility. And our society does not reward humility. In fact, quite the opposite. So when does the skin color privilege override other privileges? Now we're starting to get into far more serious conversation about the nature of privilege, and like, that's a very complex question actually, because I think that even the experts that are studying it don't really know. That it's always a combination of things, and there are always degrees, right? I have serious mental setbacks. I care for all these people because they are me. Well, I don't. That's a beautiful statement, Kate. Like, that's essentially what I say all the time, right? We are all quantum energy, right? We're all the same creature. We're all the same stuff. We're all the same entity, right? And that's where true empathy exists. That's where true empathy begins. The idea that we are all the same entity and the same species and the same thing, right? Then if you truly believe that, and if you truly believe that you are in the same, you are of the same base materia of the person that you're talking to, well, then you're going to try to connect to them on that base level, which is cuts through a lot, right? And if you're doing that, you're like far less likely to make assumptions, because you've already like paid homage and honored the one thing that we should pay attention to, which is that we are all quantum beings in a quantum energy. We don't actually have those conversations. Like, that to me is the backbone of the conversation, right? That if we are disagreeing that we are all a singular energy existing all at once within the quantum energy that we are in, if we're disagreeing on that, that's a problem. Like, that's a big, big problem. Because that's where the science is. That's where the math is. That's where that's what the quantum mechanics people are saying, right? And like, so we should start there with the idea that we are all a singular energy, and we are all collectively caught in this system. And this system is more powerful and overwhelming and all-encompassing than the systems that we create. And oftentimes the systems that we create flout in the face of the systems that the energy created. Right? That's why we're having this climate change issue. Right? The climate change issue at base is that we are paying more attention to our own systems than we are paying to the systems of the universe itself. Kate, thanks for coming in. Like, I'm not going to be able to have these big long discussions with you every single night, but I'm really happy that there are people who are as cordial and nice about you, right? About all of this. Like, this, it's. I know you take heat from some of my some of the other people, and that's how it's going to be. But I want you to know, Kate, that I don't mind at all that you come in. You remind me that we have to always be focused on the fundamentals. We got to be sharpening our tools, sharpening our wit, and also talking with one another with respect and dignity and love. And I think that you're trying to do that, Kate, and I hope that you're carrying that into your regular life. Just as I hope I'm doing the same. Because it's so difficult sometimes, right? Like, sometimes I do feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. But that's the way it's going to go. Like, that's the way it's going to go. We are going to say the same things over and over and over again. We are going to constantly be doing all this kind of stuff. So we should be sharpening our tools, especially with people who are being as nice as you are about it. I get some people in here sometimes. This hasn't happened in a long time, though. I haven't really had anybody come in recently who is just like, communism's evil and you're a dickbag and go fuck yourself and I'm gone. That hasn't happened in a while, actually. It makes me a bit suspicious. Don't you think? I'm a bit suspicious. Why haven't I had any Nazis in the chat recently? Like, remember when we were getting spammed? You guys remember when there was that guy who was spamming us with bots and shit? Where'd he go? He's gone. He's gone. Good to see you, Barnabas. Good to see you, bud. Triple checking your survival gear. Nice, bud. Nice. Barnabas has been talking to me about a book, or a story, rather, that he'd like to write. I'm outing you, Barnabas. I'm outing you. Because you did not see it coming? Very good, bud. Very good. I'm looking forward to seeing more about that, by the way, bud. You keep writing that. It's exciting, what you're doing. The Venn diagram that you showed me, with the center being change, brilliant. I think that was brilliant, dude. That's fucking amazing. Anyway. That's all internal. Haha, too bad. I won't reveal any more of your secrets, bud. I'm just letting you know. I'm really looking forward to where that goes. Read the autobiography of Malcolm X and speak to more non-whites about their experience. Understanding is important. Classic writer. Barnabas, that's exactly what every writer in the world says. I think I'm going to switch it. I got nothing to say, so I think I'll write a completely different story. Don't abandon that Venn diagram, though, dude. I really liked that. That was really... There was something there that I think was really great. And you obviously took a lot of care to make it. Yeah, read the autobiography of Malcolm X, right? Like, Malcolm X lays it out, dude. Like, and there are great speeches online. Like, you can find amazing Malcolm X speeches. Oops. Like, if you've never heard X, the ballot or the bullet, if you've never heard this speech by Malcolm X, this is good shit. This is good shit. The ballot or the bullet. Like, he really lays it out. Like, and in a way that like, it's tough to ignore. It's tough to ignore, right? You really gotta work. You really gotta work to ignore that. If you ever want to wade through a few of Bob Avakin's long diatribes, he addresses the racism question from the materialist point of view. Really culty group, though. Yeah. That is kind of one of the problems, I think, with leftists, is that they get pretty culty, and for good reason, I think, because like they've got to be protectionist, right? That they know that they're on the fringe of things, and they know that the society will be fine if it's obliterated, right? So they got to get kind of insular and tight, right? And that gives it like a real culty vibe. I've noticed that, and I'm not saying it to be insulting or to try to say that, and it shouldn't be that way or something like that. Like, I completely get it. And every single group that I've started to connect with, like, definitely they've got, like, one of us. They definitely have that kind of energy. And I just don't have the energy in myself to want to participate in that. I'm too much of a lone wolf, living out in the wilderness, being a man amongst myself, a Merlin figure, the hermit in the weeds, popping out every so often to do magic and then retreating once again. Not the king, but the kingmaker. Just so you all know, if I start talking like this, don't take any of the shit that I'm saying seriously. This is my cool white man voice. Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. Ave Kien. All right. I feel like I just unleashed a creature into the world. Maybe the story is more complex than Russia bad, Canada good. You can tell I'm reaching, eh? Like, I'm really reaching for articles today. There wasn't really any good articles today. Like, Ford says he can't see mask mandates lifting anytime soon. Yeah, like normal. Canada's state broadcaster CBC peddles lies and slanders about jailed journalist Julian Assange. And I'm kind of like, yeah, we know. You know, like, I don't think I need to read like a big diatribe to know that that's the case. What was surprising? I was very surprised by this. Like, that Julian Assange wasn't really well respected by the YouTube leftists, right? You're like Hassan or you're Vosh even, or any of these guys. I was like, dude, like, this is a fucking crucial story. The Julian Assange story is like absolutely central to what's going on in the world today. Like, here is a guy whose sin was publishing leaked documents, right? He didn't even leak the documents himself. He just published them, right? And what they've done to him is terrifying, right? It's nothing short of saying to the journalistic community, if you do this, we'll do this. Like, if you do what Julian Assange did, we will do to you what we did to him, right? And so you're never going to publish you're never going to do this, right? Yeah, not even hacked him. Like, what's his crime? Like, and then on top of that, my favorite part about this is people are like, he needs to go to the U.S. and stand trial and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, he's not a United States citizen. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Vosh has outright admitted that he has done CIA spook work before. Like, he's outright admitted he's a CIA snitch. Like, that's a straight admission by him. I don't know about Hassan. I don't know what to think about Hassan in this regard. Like, right now he's got a real Weird Al Yankovic kind of look, right? Like, right? Like, he's got a real Weird Al Yankovic look about him. But like I haven't really heard him say anything that makes me go, yikes. You know what I mean? Like, I like his voice. I like what he's bringing to the conversation. I was surprised at his sort of dismissive take on Julian Assange. That was a bit surprising. But I also am like, well, not everybody can know everything about everything, right? And like, it's possible that the only thing he knows about Julian Assange is that people like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald talk about it, right? Which, like, again, like, not every commentator is going to always talk bullshit, you know? Not everybody is always going to be wrong about everything all the time. And not everybody's going to be right about everything all the time. Like, that's the beauty of it. This is why I don't like dismissing people like Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore, and like people dredge up like one event that occurred in the life of Glenn Greenwald, and we're all supposed to be like, that's it. His whole history, his whole legacy is over because of this one mean comment he made, and he had a run-in where he got hit with like a lawsuit or something. And I'm just like, okay, so he's a fucking American lawyer, right? Like, what are you gonna do? Yeah, I mean, and that's fine. Like, not everybody is for everybody, right? That's a truism too, right? Like, not everybody is for everybody. And I'm just so, I guess, forgiving is the word that I use for a lot of, like, Hassan seems like just a straight up like young bro dude. Like, how old is this guy? Like, he's what, 30, right? Like, so he's like a Gen Z, like, or a Gen whatever. Like, he's not a millennial, so he's like one of the younger generation, right? He's just kind of like a bro dude, right? And his chat is reflective of that, right? Like, that's the big difference, is that, like, I'm trying to make like I want a chat that is actually something that I can interact with. And that you guys are interacting with each other, and everything is nice. And everything is like a nice, cordial discussion. Like, that to me would be like the absolute, like, if I hit, let's say I hit 10,000 subscribers, right? Like, that's often fairy tale land, but let's say that happens. My hope, and what I would consider to be like just an enormous victory for this channel would be that people would be in the chat and there would be discussion amongst each other in the chat, and that people would be popping up, like getting the highlighted comments and stuff for me to comment on more actively, and that I could sort of make general commentary on like the larger arguments, but everything would be nice, you know, like everything would be like, well, I see what you're saying here, but what about this piece of information, and how about this, and maybe you should Google this, like maybe that, and then like I'd like it to be more like exchanging information and coming together and all that kind of stuff, like where it's all like kind of fucking nice, you know? Whereas when I go in and watch Hassan, like his chat is just trash. It's just garbage vomiting out, just like bleh, bleh, bleh. And the way he acts with his chat is exactly the way that like a young man would act. And just like absolutely that's where it starts to get a bit cringe for me, where I'm just like, oh yeah, like come on, man, like come on. But at the same time, it's like I don't have control of the chat. Like if all you guys just started putting like fucking like one day everybody in chat just started putting bread emojis up. That's what happened. Everybody in chat was just like bread emojis, and now the whole thing is about bread. And I couldn't stop it. It just like happened. You know, it just is like this thing where it just overwhelmed the whole thing, and the whole fucking conversation became about bread and why the fuck are we doing like bread emojis and all of this. And it's like that can happen, right? I could just lose control of this shit. And so I'm curious, right, how it's gonna go as I grow. I'm sure it's a coincidence he parrots the State Department talking points as Uncle Sankey Poo. The same State Department talking points. Fuck you, Mocked. I knew it. I knew it was going to be you, too. Mocked. I don't know, though. There's nothing like on what issue, I think is what I would ask JC. Like on what issue? Like, because it seems to me like the stuff that I see come from Hassan is more on the left of the conversation. Like if he is part of the CIA kind of grift to control dissent, he is very, very good at it. Like he's really like, because he has a really firm grip on what communism is and how it interacts with the society. Like, he's got a really firm grip. I knew it. I shouldn't have said it. Now it's all bread. Guys, I have a gluten allergy. I have a gluten allergy, guys. I can't eat bread. Oh, now it's all bread. Yeah, that's fantastic. Oops, my last message should go through because of a curse word. Damn boxes. Damn boxes. You wash your mouth out. How dare you, sir? Yeah, like attitude on carbon tax rebate defined by politics, not facts. Like, yeah, like we know. Like, the Ford administration outright lied about what the carbon tax was and how it actually worked, and, like, the carbon market, like, all that. He just straight up was, like, totally lie. You'll eat pie in the sky when you die. Boy, I hope so. I hope so. I know. I was the one talking. Well, because, look, this is the thing. I actually do believe that I would be way better off. Like, if my goal was to just get as many people watching me as possible, right? And you see it. I see it all the time when I'm like scrolling socials or something on Reddit or something, right? I'll be scrolling and there'll be like a dude in a frog suit. He'll be in a frog suit, his face is painted green, and he'll be standing there, and if you tune in, he's just talking about nothing, right? He's just talking about life and like movies and stuff he's seen and all this, but he's a dude in a frog suit, right? Like, I know for a fact that if I were to like have like a loaf of bread as a crown, right? And I had like a scepter that was like a baguette, and I had like a suit that was made of like loaves of bread, and like a cape that was made of bread itself, right? That and if my chair, like if I had like a whole bread thing, so if I got up, it would be like a loaf of bread that I'm sitting on, even, right? That if I committed to this bread idea to this degree that I'm talking about now, I think I would have 1 million viewers. I think people would love it. I think I would be popular. I think I would become like an iconic figure. People would be like, yeah, the bread guy, right? And be like, yeah. And like all I would talk about is bread. That would be the whole thing, right? You would come in and then people would ask me questions and I would always like relate those questions to bread and all of this kind of stuff. I just don't know that I could look myself in the mirror. Wheat free for 12 weeks. Good for you, grinning bud. Good for you. I think your bread fantasy is physically impossible. Oh, what makes you say physically impossible, Rob? I think it could be done, right? You just lacquer everything, right? Like you take bread, like you do this in theater, right? You like if you ever see somebody walk on stage with a baguette, like or something, or a loaf of bread or something, right? That loaf of bread is not a loaf of bread. It's like been lacquered so that it's so that it is just like a permanent loaf of bread forever. Like I could definitely do that. Yep. Right wing, left wing, bread wing. Exactly. Right? I just think it would be hilarious, right? Let's take over the society with bread. And I think that conversation started to happen because there's a fellow who doesn't really come in anymore. His name was Loaf of Kropotkin, which is a very clever name because Kropotkin was the writer of a book called In Something of Bread. I'm forgetting the name of it. And then that's what sort of perpetuated the conversation. Anyway. Oh yeah, and that's what it was. Like they're going for the bread tube views, right? Like you're going for exactly bread tube, bread, right? Yeah, they have been. Well, of course they're an op. Like it's at this stage in the game, JC. I got to tell you, people keep coming up to me and doing what you're doing right now, which is like, oh, did you hear the CIA is involved in this? Did you hear the CIA is involved in that? Did you hear this guy is connected to the CIA? And I'm just like, yeah, like I kind of just assume that that's the case. You know what I mean? Like, if I found out that Hassan Piker was part of the CIA, like, and somebody actually like gave me a source document that I looked at, and I was like, Hassan Piker is on the list of CIA operatives, I would just be like, yeah, all right. Like, the Conquest of Bread. Thank you, Eric. And like the CIA is an enormous organization that obviously is doing this stuff. And it's gotten so ubiquitous and so deep and so like entrenched in serious ways that it just never surprises me anymore. I'm just never like, oh wow, did you hear so and so's? It's a part of like the bread tube thing. It's part of a CIA thing. I'm just like, yeah, probably. But like, what can I do about it? You know, John, did you hear that the CIA has been messing with Wikipedia articles? I'm like, yeah, I just sort of assumed they were. Right? Like I just sort of assumed they are, right? Which is my favorite thing now, because now I go on Wikipedia and I'm like, look, even the CIA's admitting it. like when I type in the National People's Congress, right? The National People's Congress, right? This is the governing structure of the People's Republic of China, right? And I'm like, look, even the CIA admits it. It's a democratic structure. Look, even the CIA admits it. I heard the Canadian commie is a CSIS op. Boy, man, would that my life would be a lot easier if I was a CSIS op, I gotta tell you. Like, steady paycheck, right? I'd be like, well, I'd be secured. I wouldn't have to, like, try to work in the cafe. I wouldn't be, like, selling myself. I wouldn't be reading books. Like, I'm starting to read audiobooks and get into that whole thing. And, wouldn't be doing that. I'd just be like focusing on this. Like my job would be like to wake up, probably get the sources and the documents from CSIS, and then just like do this show as if I'm a communist. So this is me saying, CSIS, hit me up. Come on, let's go. Wouldn't that be fucked? Wouldn't that just be fucked, man? Like that's I think why people get really like people don't really want to admit that the rot is as deep as it is, right? Like, but once you understand that like people like Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow, right? Like once you understand that these guys are like CIA ops, like they're all in bed with the CIA, they read CIA talking points. Like once you understand that, like nothing surprises me anymore. Like it's just like, yeah, of course. And the Uyghur genocide thing also really put me into a place where I'm like look at the lies that they're willing to tell. Like look at the enormous high scale absurdist lies that they're willing to tell. And like once you get to that point, it's just like, yeah, like, who can you believe? Right? Like, this is a problem that I definitely struggle with. Like, who can you actually believe? Right? Like, sometimes I read articles, and the article is from, like, a third-party source, right? It's not a establishment media source or something. And I kind of think to myself, like, is this a CIA thing? Like, this feels very, like, CIA-y. And, like, how do we distinguish who's trustworthy from who's not trustworthy, and how do we and it's just consistently insist that we have to pursue the truth. Like that's all. Yeah, the Pentagon has a huge budget for online activities. Of course they do. Like of course they do, right? Like the multi-billion-dollar budgets. Like it's of enormous interest to them. Like the end game for the internet in the view of the empire is to privatize it and let the billionaire class buy it up, and then the billionaires will just chase the leftist off of it, right? Like once the infrastructure of the internet itself is privatized, like right now all they can do is sort of silence leftists on platforms, right? And silence people on individual platforms because they only own the individual platform. Like they only own Twitter. They only own YouTube. They only own these individual platforms. And so you can get chased off YouTube, but then you can turn to Twitch. Or you can get chased off Twitch and then turn to like Parler or Rumble is one of the more right-wing kind of ones. And like in this way it becomes kind of like a whack-a-mole game for them, right? Where like you pop down and then you lose viewership to these other platforms and all of this. And this is the game that these guys are playing. And so they can't actively silence people because then they chase people away and blah, blah, it goes on and goes on. So now they're trying to just privatize the structure of the internet itself so that if they decide to just look at a person like me and say delete, like you are off the internet now, you will be. Like, and there won't be any recourse. Like the structure of the internet itself will be owned by a class of people who will be heavily incentivized to silence dissent, right? And that's coming. Like that's for sure coming. We're going to experience that. I don't think we can. I don't think we can dodge that bullet. And once the infrastructure of the internet itself has been privatized, it'll completely change the discourse entirely and swing us pretty far to the right pretty quickly, pretty quickly, because that's the only content we'll have access to, right? That the sort of liberal niceties towards diversity and all of that will still be permitted, but any kind of class conversation, forget about it. Like that's definitely coming, which is why it's important to get into my Discord now, because should I get shut off all of these social media sites, I'm going to keep running the show through the Discord because I can do that. And it's actually really easy. How do you privatize something that is not owned by anyone? By violence. As always, right? No, they're absolutely trying to legislate an Internet 3.0. You can go find this. Let me. Internet 3.0. Web 3. Right? An idea for a new iteration of the World Wide Web based on blockchain, right? It's this whole fucking bullshit. which incorporates concepts including decentralization, token-based economics. But of course, like, decentralization doesn't work if wealth is centralized, right? Like, if wealth is centralized, you can't decentralize anything, because if you decentralize something, then the wealthy can just buy it. Ooh, Discord is the devil. Strong statements coming from JC tonight. What's the beef with Discord, yo? I mean, I've been running into a little bit, not on my channel, but I've talked to people who have said that they've experienced a little bit of pushback from Discord. I'm too opinionated to survive Discord. Well, that's probably why you're doing so well here, JC. Honestly, I don't mind somebody coming in and pushing their weight around a little bit. It's kind of nice, actually. Some technologists and journalists have contrasted it with Web 2.0, wherein they say data and content are centralized in a small group of companies, sometimes referred to as big tech. The term was coined in 2014 by Ethereum co-founder Gavin Wood, and the idea gained interest in 2021 from cryptocurrency enthusiasts, large technology companies, and venture capital firms. Yeah, no shit. Like, no shit. I would be extremely interested in privatizing the infrastructure of the internet if I was a billionaire, right? Like, I can literally control information. Like, I control what the society gets to see. And the idea that it's not going to go that way it's absolutely going to go this way. Anyway. HTML doesn't have a payment mechanism. It was made to share information for free. Yeah, the next HTML will have some form of value transfer. Yeah. Always got to meter it. Always got to meter it. Wedge yourself between people and the... Wedge yourself between the people and what they want, right? If they could meter air, they would, right? It's very straightforward. Like, if they could put a meter on the amount of air that you breathe, they would do it. Right? So they're just trying to meter the internet. And they don't want to just meter the connection to the internet. They want to meter the internet itself. When, like, man, can you imagine living in a world where, like, things like the internet, electricity itself, like large systems are just, like, available? That they're just, like, you can just pick them out of the air. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? Can't have that. Oh yeah, my favorite thing to do recently, you can go to the Government of Canada's website and see the shit that they're doing, right? What Canadian Armed Forces members are doing during Operation Proteus, right? The CAF members in Operation Proteus fill key USSC positions. They are integrated part of the team. Task Force Jerusalem's aim within the team is to help the Palestinian Authority security forces build their capacity. Like, they're just admitting it. They're just like, yeah, it's on the Government of Canada website. Yeah, we're arming. Yeah, we need to charge the capitalists for our data. No shit, eh? We just gave that shit to them for free. We've actually got recordings of Zuckerberg being like, and they just gave it to me. Like, he just straight out says this. He's just like, I can't believe it. Like, I put this thing up. I said, give me all your information. And they just gave it to me. Like, wow. I didn't realize all you had to do was ask. Like, Zuckerberg is one of the just, like, most brutal versions of, like, I mean, from Martha Kelly. Under capitalism, it's normal to let children go hungry, let banks force people out of their homes, let sick people die for lack of access to health care. But the idea that billionaires could just be less rich, not poor, not struggling, just less rich, is considered insane. Yeah. Like the normalization of our destruction, right? And the word normalization is exactly what I think we need to focus on and what we need to be breaking apart. It's not normal to live this way. Right? This isn't normal, what we're doing. It's this idea that we need to be in a constant antagonistic battle with one another. Right? The idea that there are two classes that are in constant fight with one another. and that we're not permitted to attempt to ameliorate this central antagonism that exists in our society, right? And it's a centralized antagonism, right? That encompasses and overwhelms every aspect of our lives, and we just don't talk about it. Like, it gets to be a bit much, frankly. And hopefully we can get to a point where we can actually say, like, hey, why is my humanity defined by who I sell myself to, and not just assumed because I am here, right? Like, why is it that my job is what defines me, instead of who I am as a person and how I treat people, right? Maybe that's pie in the sky utopianism, but I don't think so. All right, guys, we've reached the end of it. I've got a pug here looking at me being like, I could go down and use the bathroom. Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure you never realize it. Because if you do, you might think you're just as valid as they are. And they can't commodify you if you think that way. Rebel, revolt, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.